Upon seeing his newborn son, a millionaire makes a cruel decision and abandons him. 25 years later, he is left speechless when he recognizes the surgeon who once held his life in their hands. The New York skyline glittered like a constellation of dreams against the fading twilight. From his penthouse office on the 60th floor, Maxwell Blackwood surveyed the city he had helped shape over the past 3 decades. At 58, he was the epitome of success, distinguished, powerful, and seemingly untouchable. The Wall Street Journal had once dubbed him the architect of modernity, a title he wore with pride and, though few knew it, a hidden burden. Maxwell's eyes traced the outline of his latest project, a gleaming tower of glass and steel that would soon become the crown jewel of Manhattan's financial district. It was a testament to his vision, his ability to transform forgotten lots into landmarks of innovation and luxury. As he gazed at the half-finished structure, a familiar sense of satisfaction washed over him, quickly followed by an equally familiar pang of emptiness. A gentle knock on the door interrupted his reverie. "Mr. Blackwood." His assistant, Sarah, poked her head in. "The board members have arrived for the meeting." Maxwell nodded, straightening his already impeccable tie. "Thank you, Sarah. I'll be right there." As he gathered his papers, his hand brushed against a small ornate box hidden in the depths of his desk drawer. For a moment, his fingers lingered on its smooth surface, a flash of pain crossing his face. Then, as quickly as it had appeared, the emotion vanished, replaced by the mask of confidence he had perfected over the years. The boardroom fell silent as Maxwell entered. 8 pairs of eyes watched him expectantly, a mix of admiration and wariness in their gazes. He took his place at the head of the table, a king holding court. "Ladies and gentlemen," he began, his voice smooth and authoritative, "thank you for joining me this evening. As you know, we're here to discuss the final phases of the Orion project." For the next hour, Maxwell led the meeting with the precision of a conductor guiding an orchestra. He addressed concerns, outlined strategies, and painted a vision of the future so vivid that even the most skeptical board members found themselves nodding in agreement. As the meeting concluded, Maxwell felt a familiar rush of adrenaline. This was where he thrived, in rooms where decisions were made, futures shaped, and legacies cemented. Yet, as the board members filed out, exchanging congratulations and excited murmurs, Maxwell felt the weight of solitude settle upon his shoulders once more. He remained in the boardroom long after the others had left, staring out at the city he had helped build. The lights of New York twinkled back at him, a million stories unfolding in the streets below. How many of those lives had he touched with his work? How many dreams had he helped realize? And yet, as he stood there, the most powerful man in the room, Maxwell Blackwood felt utterly alone. His phone buzzed, jolting him from his thoughts. It was a message from his longtime friend and confidant, Dr. Elizabeth Chen. "Don't forget your checkup tomorrow, Max. 10 a.m. sharp. No excuses this time." Maxwell smiled wryly. Elizabeth was one of the few people who could speak to him so directly. They had known each other for years, their friendship a constant in a life defined by change and progress. She was also one of the only people who knew the truth about his past, or at least part of it. As he gathered his things to leave, Maxwell's mind drifted to the upcoming medical appointment. He had been putting it off for months, always finding one more project, one more meeting to prioritize. But Elizabeth was right. It was time to face the music. The elevator ride down to the lobby was swift and silent. As Maxwell stepped out into the cool evening air, he nodded to the doorman and declined the offer to call his driver. Tonight, he felt the need to walk, to be among the people whose lives were so different from his own. As he moved through the bustling streets, Maxwell couldn't shake the feeling that something was about to change. It wasn't just the impending medical checkup. There was a sense of foreboding that he couldn't quite place. He had built his empire on calculated risks and an uncanny ability to predict the future. But for once, Maxwell Blackwood felt unsure of what lay ahead. The city pulsed around him, oblivious to his inner turmoil. Couples laughed as they exited restaurants, street vendors called out their wares, and taxis honked impatiently at pedestrians. It was a symphony of life, a reminder of the world that existed beyond boardrooms and balance sheets. As he walked, Maxwell found himself in a part of the city he rarely visited anymore, the The streets were narrower here, the buildings older and less polished. It was a far cry from the sleek modernity of his usual haunts, but something about it felt familiar, almost comforting. He paused in front of a small park, watching as a young couple pushed a laughing toddler on a swing. The sight stirred something deep within him, a memory long buried but never truly forgotten. For a moment, Maxwell allowed himself to imagine a different life, one where success was measured not in dollars and square footage, but in moments of joy and connection. The spell was broken by the sharp ring of his phone. Reality came rushing back as Maxwell answered, his voice once again assuming the tone of the powerful CEO. "Blackwood speaking." As he turned to head back to his world of high-rises and high stakes, Maxwell cast one last glance at the family in the park. The father was now cradling the child, his face a picture of pure love and contentment. It was an image that would haunt Maxwell long into the night, a reminder of the road not taken and the price of ambition. Little did he know, as he walked away from that scene of domestic bliss, that the universe was already setting in motion a series of events that would force him to confront the choices of his past and the possibility of a very different future. The night deepened around Maxwell Blackwood as he made his way home, the weight of unspoken regrets hanging heavy on his shoulders. Tomorrow would bring a new day, new challenges, and perhaps, though he didn't know it yet, the beginning of a journey that would shake the very foundations of the empire he had built. The morning sun streamed through the windows of St. Mary's Hospital, casting long shadows across the polished floors. Dr. Nathan Foster moved swiftly through the corridors, his white coat billowing behind him like a cape. At 25, he was already one of the most respected neurosurgeons in the country, known not only for his exceptional skills, but also for his compassion and dedication to patients others might have given up on. As he approached the nurse's station, Nathan's unique appearance drew the usual mix of curious glances and warm smiles. His striking blue eyes and sharp features contrasted with the intricate pattern of birthmarks that covered the left side of his face and neck. It was a condition that had once marked him as an outcast, but now served as a badge of his resilience and determination. "Good morning, Dr. Foster," chirped Nurse Rodriguez, handing him a stack of charts. "You've got a busy day ahead. The Johnsons want to thank you personally for saving their daughter, and there's a consult in room 305 that Dr. Chen specifically requested you for." Nathan nodded, his mind already racing through the day's schedule. "Thanks, Maria. I'll start with the consult. Any details on the patient?" "Not much," Maria replied, lowering her voice. "Just that it's a high-profile case." Dr. Chen seemed pretty concerned. Intrigued, Nathan made his way to room 305. He knocked gently before entering, finding Dr. Elizabeth Chen already there, engaged in quiet conversation with a distinguished-looking man in his late 50s. "Ah, Nathan. Perfect timing," Elizabeth said, motioning him over. "I'd like you to meet Mr. Maxwell Blackwood. Mr. Blackwood, this is Dr. Nathan Foster, the surgeon I was telling you about." Nathan's eyes widened slightly at the name. Even in medical circles, Maxwell Blackwood was something of a legend, the billionaire developer who had reshaped the New York skyline. He extended his hand, noting the brief flicker of surprise in Blackwood's eyes as they shook hands. "It's an honor to meet you, Mr. Blackwood," Nathan said warmly. "Dr. Chen speaks highly of you." Maxwell nodded, his expression a careful mask of neutrality. "The honor is mine, Dr. Foster. Your reputation precedes you." As Nathan began to review Maxwell's chart, Elizabeth filled him in on the situation. "Mr. Blackwood has been experiencing severe headaches and moments of disorientation. The initial scans show a small aneurysm that needs immediate attention." Nathan studied the scans, his brow furrowed in concentration. "I see, Mr. Blackwood. Have you noticed any changes in your vision or any numbness in your extremities?" As Maxwell began to answer, Nathan couldn't shake the feeling that something was off. The older man's gaze kept darting to the left side of Nathan's face, a mix of emotions flickering across his features too quickly to decipher. Yes, there have been some issues with my peripheral vision," Maxwell admitted, his usual confidence seeming to waver. "And occasionally, my left hand feels distant somehow." Nathan nodded, his mind already formulating a treatment plan. "Based on what I'm seeing, I recommend we schedule surgery as soon as possible. The aneurysm is small, but its location is concerning. If left untreated, it could rupture, leading to severe complications. Maxwell's face paled slightly, but he quickly regained his composure. "I understand. How soon can we do this?" "I can clear my schedule for tomorrow morning," Nathan replied, his tone reassuring. "We'll need to run a few more tests today, but I assure you, Mr. Blackwood, you're in good hands." As Nathan continued to explain the procedure, he couldn't help but notice the way Maxwell's gaze kept returning to the delicate silver chain around his neck. The pendant, usually hidden beneath his scrubs, had slipped out during his explanation. It was a simple thing, a small locket containing a message Nathan had never been able to open. "That's an interesting piece," Maxwell commented, his voice strained. "Family heirloom?" Nathan's hand instinctively went to the locket, a shadow passing over his face. "Something like that. It's been with me as long as I can remember." An awkward silence fell over the room, broken only when Elizabeth cleared her throat. "Well, I think that covers everything for now. Nathan, why don't you go ahead and schedule those additional tests? I'll stay here with Mr. Blackwood to go over some paperwork." As Nathan left the room, his mind was whirling. There was something about Maxwell Blackwood that unsettled him, a nagging feeling that there was more to this situation than a simple medical procedure. He shook his head, trying to focus on the task at hand. Whatever personal mysteries might be at play, his job was to ensure his patient received the best possible care. Back in room 305, Maxwell sat on the edge of the bed, his head in his hands. "Lizzie," he said softly, using the nickname from their college days, "tell me I'm not going crazy. That necklace—" Elizabeth placed a comforting hand on his shoulder. "Max, I know what you're thinking, but it's impossible. The odds of such a coincidence—" "Is it, though?" Maxwell interrupted, his voice barely above a whisper. "The age is right. Those birthmarks, they're exactly as the doctors described them all those years ago. And that necklace, Lizzie, it's the same one. I'd stake my life on it." Elizabeth sighed, her heart heavy with the weight of a secret long kept. "Max, even if what you're suggesting is true, what does it change? You made your choice back then. Opening this door now, it could destroy everything, for both of you." Maxwell looked up, his eyes filled with a mixture of hope and fear. "Or it could be a chance to make things right. To fill this void I've been carrying for 25 years. As they continued to talk in hushed tones, neither noticed the figure that paused briefly outside the door. Nathan, returning with the scheduling forms. He had only caught snippets of their conversation, but it was enough to send a chill down his spine. Walking away, Nathan felt as though the ground beneath his feet had suddenly become unsteady. The locket around his neck, a constant reminder of his mysterious origins, seemed to grow heavier with each step. For years, he had wondered about his birth parents, about the circumstances that had led to his abandonment. Now, on the eve of a critical surgery, he found himself face to face with a man who might hold the answers to questions he had long ago given up asking. As the day wore on, both Nathan and Maxwell found themselves grappling with the implications of their chance encounter. For Nathan, it was the possibility of finally uncovering the truth about his past. For Maxwell, it was the terrifying prospect of facing the consequences of a decision made decades ago. The hospital buzzed with its usual activity, oblivious to the personal drama unfolding within its walls. As night fell, casting long shadows across the city, two men lay awake in different parts of New York, each contemplating a future that suddenly seemed fraught with both danger and possibility. Tomorrow's surgery loomed large in both their minds, but for reasons that went far beyond the realm of medical science. As the city slept, the stage was set for a confrontation that would change both their lives forever, forcing them to reckon with the ties that bind and the power of choices made long ago. The early morning light crept through the Venetian blinds of Nathan Foster's modest apartment, casting thin stripes across his restless form. He had tossed and turned all night, his mind a whirlwind of questions and half-formed theories. The encounter with Maxwell Blackwood had stirred something deep within him, a longing for answers he had long ago forced himself to ignore. With a sigh, Nathan pushed himself out of bed and padded to the bathroom. As he splashed cold water on his face, he studied his reflection in the mirror. The intricate pattern of birthmarks that covered the left side of his face seemed more prominent this morning, a stark reminder of his uniqueness and his unknown origins. His hand instinctively went to the locket around his neck. For as long as he could remember, it had been his one tangible connection to a past shrouded in mystery. The words engraved on its surface had been both a comfort and a source of endless questions. "You are loved even from afar." As he prepared for the day ahead, Nathan's thoughts drifted to the family that had raised him. The Fosters had adopted him when he was just a few months old, providing a home filled with love and support. They had never tried to hide the fact that he was adopted, always encouraging his curiosity about his biological parents. But the trail had always run cold, leaving Nathan with nothing but speculation and that enigmatic locket. The drive to St. Mary's Hospital was a blur of early morning traffic and swirling thoughts. Nathan found himself in the unusual position of dreading a surgery. It wasn't the procedure itself that concerned him. He had performed far more complex operations. No, it was the patient that had him on edge. As he walked through the hospital corridors, Nathan was greeted by the usual mix of respectful nods from colleagues and grateful smiles from patients and their families. He had worked hard to earn his reputation, pushing himself to excel not just in the operating room, but in the often overlooked aspects of patient care. "Good morning, Dr. Foster," Nurse Rodriguez called out as he approached the surgical floor. "Mr. Blackwood has already been prepped and is waiting in pre-op. Dr. Chen asked to speak with you before the procedure." Nathan nodded his thanks, steeling himself for what lay ahead. He found Elizabeth in her office, poring over a stack of medical files. "Nathan," she said, looking up as he entered, "how are you feeling about today's procedure?" "Prepared," he replied, his tone more clipped than usual. "Is there something specific you wanted to discuss?" Elizabeth studied him for a moment, her eyes narrowing slightly. "You seemed distracted yesterday. I just wanted to make sure you're in the right headspace for this. Maxwell Blackwood isn't just any patient." Nathan felt a flicker of irritation. "I'm well aware of who he is, Dr. Chen. I can assure you my focus is entirely on ensuring the best possible outcome for Mr. Blackwood." Elizabeth nodded, but Nathan could see the concern lingering in her eyes. "Of course. I didn't mean to imply otherwise. It's just, there's a lot riding on this, Nathan. More than you might realize." Before Nathan could press her on what she meant, a knock at the door interrupted them. A nurse poked her head in, informing them that it was time to begin the procedure. As Nathan scrubbed in, he forced himself to focus on the task at hand. Whatever mysteries or coincidences might be swirling around this case, right now his job was clear: save a life. The operating room was a hive of focused activity as Nathan entered. He nodded to his team, each member hand-picked for their skills and dedication. As he approached the operating table, he caught sight of Maxwell Blackwood's face, peaceful in unconsciousness. For a moment, Nathan was struck by a sense of familiarity so strong it nearly took his breath away. Shaking off the feeling, Nathan took a deep breath and began the procedure. As he worked, the outside world faded away. Here, in the realm of synapses and blood vessels, Nathan was in his element. His hands moved with practiced precision, navigating the delicate landscape of the human brain. Hours passed in what felt like minutes. As Nathan made the final, crucial moves to secure the aneurysm, a tense silence fell over the operating room. With a final snip, it was done. The threat had been neutralized. A collective sigh of relief swept through the room, followed by muted congratulations. Nathan stepped back, allowing the rest of the team to begin the process of closing up. As he stripped off his gloves and surgical gown, he felt the familiar rush of post-operative adrenaline, tinged this time with something else, a sense of unfinished business. Outside the operating room, Elizabeth was waiting. "How did it go?" she asked, her voice tight with anxiety. "Textbook procedure," Nathan replied, unable to keep a note of pride from his voice. "The aneurysm is fully secured. Barring any unforeseen complications, Mr. Blackwood should make a full recovery." Elizabeth's relief was palpable. That's wonderful news, Nathan. Truly excellent work." As they walked together towards the recovery area, Nathan couldn't shake the feeling that there was more Elizabeth wasn't telling him. "Dr. Chen," he began, choosing his words carefully, "I couldn't help but overhear part of your conversation with Mr. Blackwood yesterday. Is there something about this case I should know?" Elizabeth's step faltered for a moment. "Nathan, it's complicated. There are aspects of Maxwell's past that are sensitive, things that aren't my place to disclose. Nathan felt a surge of frustration. With all due respect, Dr. Chen, if there's something that could affect Mr. Blackwood's treatment or recovery, I need to know. They had reached the door to the recovery room. Elizabeth turned to face Nathan, her expression a mix of sympathy and resolve. You're right. You do deserve to know. But it's not my story to tell. When the time is right, I think Maxwell will want to speak with you himself. With that cryptic statement, she pushed open the door, leaving Nathan standing in the hallway more confused than ever. As he watched Elizabeth check on the still unconscious Maxwell Blackwood, Nathan's hand went once again to the locket around his neck. Whatever secrets lay buried in Maxwell Blackwood's past, Nathan had a growing suspicion that they were inextricably linked to his own. As he turned to leave, determined to get some rest before the post-op monitoring began, Nathan couldn't shake the feeling that his life was on the brink of irrevocable change. The hospital corridors seemed different somehow as he made his way out, as if the very air was charged with potential. Nathan Foster had entered that operating room as a surgeon focused on saving a life. He left it with the unsettling certainty that in doing so, he had set in motion events that would unravel the very foundations of his own existence. The steady beep of medical monitors filled the recovery room, a rhythmic reminder of life's fragility. Maxwell Blackwood's eyes fluttered open, his vision blurry and unfocused. As consciousness slowly returned, so did the weight of recent events and long-buried secrets. "Welcome back, Mr. Blackwood," a gentle voice said. Elizabeth Chen's face swam into view, her expression a mixture of professional concern and personal relief. The surgery was a success. Dr. Foster did an excellent job. At the mention of Nathan's name, Maxwell's heart rate spiked, causing a momentary increase in the monitor's beeping. Elizabeth placed a calming hand on his arm. "Easy, Max. You need to rest." Maxwell tried to speak, but his throat was dry and raw from the intubation. Elizabeth offered him some ice chips, which he accepted gratefully. After a few moments, he managed to croak out, "Nathan, is he?" Elizabeth's face softened. "He's fine, Max. He performed the surgery brilliantly, but I think what you're really asking is something else entirely." Maxwell nodded weakly, his eyes pleading for answers. "I haven't told him anything," Elizabeth continued, her voice low. "But Max, he's not stupid. He knows something is going on. You can't keep this from him forever." A single tear escaped the corner of Maxwell's eye, tracing a path down his weathered cheek. "How can I tell him, Lizzie? How do I even begin to explain?" Elizabeth squeezed his hand gently. "I don't have all the answers, Max, but I do know that the truth has a way of coming out, one way or another. Maybe it's better if it comes from you." As Maxwell drifted back into a drug-induced sleep, his dreams were a chaotic swirl of past and present. He saw himself as a young man, full of ambition and promise, standing hand in hand with Sarah, the love of his life. Her radiant smile, the sparkle in her eyes as she told him she was pregnant, it all felt so real, so immediate. But then the scene shifted, and he was in a sterile hospital room, the air heavy with unspoken tension. Sarah's face, tear-stained and anguished, as the doctor explained their unborn child's condition. The fear that had gripped him then, not for the child's health, but for what it might mean for his carefully constructed image and plans for the future. The dream twisted again, and now he was standing in a dimly lit room, a tiny bundle in his arms. The baby's face, marked with an intricate pattern of birthmarks, looked up at him with eyes that seemed far too knowing for a newborn. He felt the weight of the locket in his hand, heard himself whispering, "You are loved even from afar," as he placed the child in the arms of a kindly-looking nurse. Maxwell jolted awake, his heart racing. The recovery room was quiet now, the lights dimmed for the night. As his eyes adjusted to the darkness, he realized he wasn't alone. A figure sat in the chair beside his bed, head bowed in what appeared to be sleep. It was Nathan. Maxwell's breath caught in his throat. In the soft glow of the medical monitors, the resemblance was undeniable. The strong jawline, the set of his shoulders. It was like looking at a younger version of himself, and there, visible even in the dim light, was the intricate pattern of birthmarks that had haunted Maxwell's dreams for 25 years. As if sensing Maxwell's gaze, Nathan stirred, lifting his head. Their eyes met. and for a long moment, neither spoke. The air between them seemed to crackle with unasked questions and unspoken truths. "Mr. Blackwood," Nathan said finally, his voice soft but steady, "I'm glad to see you're awake. How are you feeling?" Maxwell swallowed hard, trying to find his voice. I'm feeling much better, thank you, Dr. Foster. Your skill in the operating room is remarkable." Nathan nodded, a small smile playing at the corners of his mouth. "I'm glad to hear it. The procedure went very smoothly. You should make a full recovery, though it will take some time." Another silence fell between them, heavy with all the things left unsaid. Maxwell's hand moved unconsciously to his chest, where a scar from the surgery was hidden beneath hospital-issued gowns. Nathan's eyes followed the movement, and Maxwell saw a flicker of something, recognition, curiosity, in the young doctor's gaze. "That's an interesting necklace you wear, Dr. Foster," Maxwell said, his voice barely above a whisper. May I ask where you got it?" Nathan's hand went to the locket, his expression guarded. "It's been with me as long as I can remember. A gift from my birth parents, I suppose, though I never knew them." Maxwell felt his heart constrict. Here it was, the moment of truth. He could feel the weight of his past pressing down on him, urging him to speak, to confess, to seek forgiveness. But as he opened his mouth, the words stuck in his throat. Nathan leaned forward, his eyes intense. "Mr. Blackwood, I couldn't help but notice. During our initial consultation, you seemed affected by my appearance. And now this interest in my necklace, I have to ask, is there something you're not telling me?" The tension in the room was palpable. Maxwell felt as though he was standing on the edge of a precipice, the ground crumbling beneath his feet. Every fiber of his being screamed at him to tell the truth, to bridge the gap of 25 years with 3 simple words: "I am your father." But fear, that old familiar companion, held him back. Fear of rejection, fear of judgment, fear of dismantling the carefully constructed life he had built on the foundation of that long-ago decision. Maxwell began, his voice trembling. "I'm sorry, Dr. Foster. The medication must be affecting me more than I realized. I think I need to rest now." He saw the disappointment flash across Nathan's face, quickly masked by professional composure. "Of course, Mr. Blackwood. Please get some rest. We can talk more when you're feeling stronger." As Nathan rose to leave, Maxwell felt a wave of self-loathing wash over him. Once again he had chosen the easy path, the coward's way out. As the door closed behind the young doctor, Maxwell turned his face to the wall, hot tears of regret soaking into his pillow. Outside in the corridor, Nathan leaned against the wall, his mind reeling. He had come so close, he was sure of it, to uncovering the truth about his past. But once again the answers had slipped through his fingers like smoke. As he made his way back to his office, Nathan's resolve hardened. One way or another, he would get to the bottom of this mystery. Little did he know that fate, having brought father and son together after 25 years, was not done with them yet. The stage was set for revelations that would shake both their worlds to the core. The days following Maxwell Blackwood's surgery passed in a haze of recovery and unspoken tension. The hospital room, once a backdrop for life-altering revelations, had become a stage for an intricate dance of avoidance and lingering glances. Nathan Foster found himself drawn to room 305 more often than strictly necessary. Each visit was a delicate balance of professional duty and personal curiosity. He checked vitals, adjusted medications, and searched Maxwell's face for any hint of the secret he was certain lay just beneath the surface. On the 5th day post-surgery, Nathan entered the room to find Maxwell sitting up in bed, looking out the window at the bustling New York streets below. The older man's profile, etched against the bright sunlight, struck Nathan with an odd sense of familiarity. "Good morning, Mr. Blackwood," Nathan said, breaking the silence. "How are you feeling today?" Maxwell turned, a weary smile crossing his face. "Better, Dr. Foster, thank you. Your skill as a surgeon is remarkable." Nathan nodded, moving to check the various monitors surrounding the bed. As he worked, he could feel Maxwell's eyes on him, studying him with an intensity that made the hair on the back of his neck stand up. "You know," Maxwell began, his voice hesitant, "I've been meaning to ask you about your family. Do you have any siblings?" The question caught Nathan off guard. He paused in his work, turning to face Maxwell. "No, I'm an only child. Adopted, actually." A flicker of emotion, was it pain, regret, crossed Maxwell's face. "I see. And your adoptive parents, they've been good to you?" Nathan's brow furrowed slightly. These questions seemed to cross the line of standard doctor-patient small talk. Yet, he found himself answering, "They're wonderful. I couldn't have asked for better parents. They've supported me through everything, including—" He gestured vaguely to the left side of his face, where his birthmark stood out in stark relief. Maxwell nodded, his eyes never leaving Nathan's face. That's good to hear. Family is important. More important than some of us realize until it's too late." There was a weight to Maxwell's words that Nathan couldn't quite decipher. Before he could probe further, a knock at the door interrupted them. Elizabeth Chen entered, her eyes darting between the two men, sensing the charged atmosphere. "Nathan, I'm glad I caught you," she said, her tone deliberately light. "There's a consult I'd like you to sit in on. Mr. Blackwood, if you don't mind, I'd like to borrow your doctor for a bit." Maxwell waved a hand dismissively, but Nathan didn't miss the look that passed between the older man and Elizabeth. It was a look laden with unspoken communication, the kind shared by people with a long, complicated history. As Nathan followed Elizabeth out of the room, his mind was whirling. Every interaction with Maxwell Blackwood left him with more questions than answers. The curiosity that had always simmered beneath the surface of his life about his origins, his birth parents, was now a roaring flame threatening to consume him. Elizabeth led Nathan to her office, closing the door behind them. "Nathan," she began, her voice gentle but firm, "I couldn't help but notice you've been spending a lot of time with Mr. Blackwood." Nathan felt a defensive surge. "I'm just being thorough with his post-op care. He's an important patient, after all." Elizabeth sighed, sinking into her chair. "Nathan, I've known you since you were a medical student. You're not just being thorough. There's something else going on here." For a moment, Nathan considered deflecting, maintaining the professional facade he'd worked so hard to perfect. But the weight of the past few days, of the questions that had plagued him his entire life, suddenly felt too heavy to bear alone. "Dr. Chen," he said, his voice barely above a whisper, I think Maxwell Blackwood might know something about my birth parents." Elizabeth's face remained carefully neutral, but Nathan caught the slight tightening around her eyes. "What makes you say that?" Nathan ran a hand through his hair, frustration evident in every line of his body. "It's just the way he looks at me, the questions he asks. And that first day when he saw my necklace," his hand went unconsciously to the locket around his neck. "There's something he's not telling me, something about my past." Elizabeth was quiet for a long moment, her gaze fixed on some point beyond Nathan's shoulder. When she finally spoke, her voice was heavy with the weight of long-held secrets. "Nathan, there are complexities to this situation that you're not aware of, things that aren't my place to reveal." Nathan felt a surge of anger. "With all due respect, Dr. Chen, this is my life we're talking about, my history. Don't I have a right to know?" Elizabeth met his gaze, her eyes filled with a mixture of sympathy and resolve. "You do. But Nathan, sometimes the truth can be more complicated, more painful than we imagine. Are you sure you're ready for whatever you might discover?" The question hung in the air between them, charged with potential. Nathan thought of his adoptive parents, of the love and support they had given him unconditionally. He thought of the locket around his neck, of the words engraved there that had both comforted and haunted him. And he thought of Maxwell Blackwood, the man whose life he had saved, who now seemed to hold the key to unlocking the mystery of his own existence. "I have to know," Nathan said finally, his voice firm with conviction. "Whatever the truth is, I need to face it." Elizabeth nodded slowly, a sad smile touching her lips. "I understand. But Nathan, promise me something. Whatever you discover, remember that family isn't just about blood. The people who have loved you, supported you, raised you, they're your family too." As Nathan left Elizabeth's office, his mind was a tumult of emotions. He felt as though he were standing on the precipice of a great discovery, one that had the potential to reshape his entire understanding of himself and his place in the world. Little did he know that across the hospital, in room 305, Maxwell Blackwood was engaged in his own internal struggle. The successful businessman, the architect of modernity, found himself facing the greatest challenge of his life, confronting the consequences of a choice made 25 years ago, a choice that had shaped not just his life, but the life of the brilliant young surgeon who had saved him. As the New York sun began to set, casting long shadows across the hospital corridors, both Nathan and Maxwell found themselves at a crossroads. The truth, so long buried, was clawing its way to the surface. And in the days to come, it would change both their lives in ways neither could have imagined. The Blackwood Industries headquarters towered over Lower Manhattan, its sleek glass exterior reflecting the fading light of day. Inside, on the 60th floor, chaos reigned. News of Maxwell Blackwood's hospitalization had sent shockwaves through the corporate world, and the vultures were already circling. Victoria Blackwood, Maxwell's younger sister and CFO of the company, stood at the floor-to-ceiling windows, her sharp features set in a mask of determination. At 53, she was a force to be reckoned with in her own right, having clawed her way up the corporate ladder alongside her brother. "What do you mean he's not taking calls?" she snapped into her phone. "I don't care if he's recovering from brain surgery. This is a crisis and we need him to make a statement." On the other end of the line, Maxwell's personal assistant stammered out apologies and excuses. Victoria cut him off with a curt, "Just make it happen," before ending the call. She turned to face the room, where a group of executives sat around a large conference table, their faces a mix of concern and barely concealed ambition. Victoria knew that many of them saw Maxwell's absence as an opportunity, a chance to reshape the company in their own image. "All right, listen up," she said, her voice cutting through the murmur of conversation. "Maxwell may be out of commission for now, but that doesn't mean we're going to let this company fall apart. We need to project strength, stability. The media is having a field day with speculation, and our stock is taking a hit. Ideas, now." For the next hour, the room buzzed with strategies and counter-strategies. Victoria listened, her mind processing the information at lightning speed. But beneath her cool exterior, a storm was brewing. She couldn't shake the nagging feeling that there was more to Maxwell's situation than met the eye. As the meeting wound down, Victoria's personal phone buzzed with a text. It was from Elizabeth Chen, an old friend from college, and she knew one of the few people Maxwell truly trusted. "We need to talk. It's about Max and someone else." "Can you meet?" Victoria felt a chill run down her spine. She knew that tone, even in text form. Whatever Elizabeth wanted to discuss, it was serious. "Give me an hour," she typed back. As the executives filed out of the conference room, Victoria called her driver. "Take me to St. Mary's Hospital," she instructed, her mind already racing with possibilities. The drive through the congested New York streets seemed to take an eternity. Victoria's thoughts drifted to her brother, to the complex relationship they shared. They had always been competitive, pushing each other to greater heights. But beneath the rivalry was a deep bond, forged in the crucible of a difficult childhood and the shared dream of building something extraordinary. She remembered the day 25 years ago when Maxwell had come to her, his face pale and drawn. He had told her about Sarah's pregnancy, about the child's condition, about his fears for the future they had planned. Victoria had listened, offering what comfort she could, but in the end it had been Maxwell's decision, a decision that, she now realized, had haunted him ever since. The car pulled up to the hospital, jolting Victoria from her reverie. She strode through the lobby, her heels clicking purposefully on the polished floor. Elizabeth was waiting for her in a small private consultation room. "Vicky," Elizabeth said, embracing her old friend. "Thank you for coming." Victoria pulled back, studying Elizabeth's face. "What's going on, Liz? Is Max all right?" Elizabeth sighed, gesturing for Victoria to sit. "Max is recovering well physically, but Vicky, there's something you need to know. Something that could change everything." Over the next half hour, Elizabeth laid out the situation. She told Victoria about Nathan Foster, the brilliant young surgeon who had saved Maxwell's life. About the birthmarks that matched the description of the child Maxwell and Sarah had given up all those years ago. About the locket and the growing suspicion that the past had come full circle. Victoria listened in stunned silence, her mind reeling with the implications. When Elizabeth finished, Victoria leaned back in her chair, her eyes closed, Does he know? She asked finally. This Dr. Foster, does he know who he is? Elizabeth shook her head. Not yet, but he suspects something. He's been asking questions, and Max is struggling, Vicky. He wants to tell him, but he's terrified. Victoria's eyes snapped open, a fire blazing in their depths. No, she said firmly, absolutely not. Do you have any idea what this could do to the company? To everything we've built. Elizabeth looked at her old friend, a mix of sympathy and disappointment in her eyes. Vicky, we're talking about a human being here, Max's son, your nephew. A son he gave up, Victoria shot back. A decision we all agreed was for the best. Opening this can of worms now. It could destroy everything. The two women stared at each other, the weight of the past and the uncertainty of the future hanging heavy between them. Finally, Elizabeth spoke, her voice soft but resolute. It's not our decision to make, Vicky. Max is the one who has to decide what to do with this information, and Nathan, he has a right to know the truth about his origins. Victoria stood, pacing the small room like a caged tiger. Her mind was working overtime, analyzing angles, considering consequences. She had always been the pragmatist to Maxwell's dreamer, the one who made the hard choices to protect their shared vision. I need to see him, she said finally. I need to talk to Max before this goes any further. Elizabeth nodded, standing as well. I'll take you to his room. But Vicky, tread carefully. Max is in a fragile state right now, emotionally as well as physically. As they made their way to Maxwell's room, Victoria's resolve hardened. She had spent a lifetime protecting her brother, protecting their shared dream. She wasn't about to let it all crumble now, no matter how compelling the reason. But as they turned the corner, Victoria stopped short. Through the half-open door of Maxwell's room, she could see her brother. And standing by his bedside, checking some monitors, was a young man with a striking pattern of birthmarks on the left side of his face. For a moment, Victoria felt as though the ground had dropped out from beneath her feet. The resemblance was undeniable. In that instant, all her carefully constructed arguments, all her pragmatic concerns, seemed to evaporate. "Oh, Max," she whispered, her voice barely audible. "What have we done?" Inside the room, oblivious to the drama unfolding in the hallway, Nathan Foster continued his examination of Maxwell Blackwood. The tension between them was palpable, a secret on the verge of revelation. As Victoria watched, frozen in place, she realized that the carefully constructed world she and Maxwell had built was about to change forever. The question was, would they be able to adapt to this new reality, or would the weight of long-buried truths bring their entire empire crashing down around them? With a deep breath, Victoria straightened her shoulders and stepped forward. Whatever came next, she would face it head-on as she always had. The time for secrets was coming to an end. And in their place, a new chapter was about to begin. The soft glow of dawn was just beginning to paint the New York skyline as Nathan Foster made his way through the quiet hospital corridors. He had barely slept, his mind a whirlwind of questions and theories. The conversation with Dr. Chen had only intensified his determination to uncover the truth about his past. As he approached Maxwell Blackwood's room, Nathan paused, taking a deep breath to steady himself. He had made a decision during his restless night. Today, he would confront Maxwell directly. No more dancing around the subject, no more veiled questions. It was time for answers. But as he reached for the door handle, a voice behind him made him freeze. "Dr. Foster!" Nathan turned to find himself face to face with Victoria Blackwood. He recognized her immediately from the countless news articles and business magazines he had pored over in the past few days, trying to piece together the puzzle of Maxwell Blackwood's life. "Ms. Blackwood," Nathan replied, his voice carefully neutral. "I'm sorry, but visiting hours haven't started yet. If you'd like to wait in the—" "I'm not here as a visitor," Victoria interrupted, her eyes boring into Nathan's with an intensity that made him take an involuntary step back. "I'm here to talk to you. About my brother, yes, but more importantly, about you." Nathan felt his heart rate quicken. "I'm not sure I understand." Victoria glanced around the empty corridor before fixing Nathan with a piercing stare. "I think you do, Dr. Foster. Or should I say, nephew?" The word hung in the air between them, heavy with implication. Nathan felt as though the floor had suddenly tilted beneath his feet. He had been preparing himself for a confrontation with Maxwell, but this This blindsided him completely. What are you saying?" he managed to stammer out. Victoria's expression softened slightly, a flicker of sympathy crossing her face. "I think it's time we had a long overdue conversation. But not here. Meet me in the hospital cafeteria in 10 minutes. And Dr. Foster, let's keep this between us for now." With that, she turned on her heel and strode away, leaving Nathan standing in the hallway, his mind reeling. He looked at the closed door of Maxwell's room, then back at Victoria's retreating form. With a deep breath, he made his decision and followed Victoria. The hospital cafeteria was nearly deserted at this early hour. Nathan found Victoria seated at a corner table, 2 steaming cups of coffee in front of her. As he approached, she gestured for him to sit. "I took the liberty of ordering for you," she said, pushing one of the cups towards him. "I hope you don't mind." Nathan sat, wrapping his hands around the warm cup but not drinking. "Ms. Blackwood, I think you owe me an explanation." Victoria nodded, her face a mask of careful control. "Indeed I do, but first I need you to understand something. What I'm about to tell you, it has the potential to change many lives, not just yours and Maxwell's. Are you prepared for that?" Nathan felt a surge of frustration. "With all due respect, Ms. Blackwood, I've spent my entire life wondering about my origins. Whatever the truth is, I need to know it." Victoria studied him for a long moment before speaking. "Very well. 25 years ago, my brother and his then-girlfriend, Sarah, were expecting a child. They were young, ambitious, with their whole lives ahead of them. But during a routine checkup, they received news that complicated things." Nathan's hand unconsciously went to his face, tracing the pattern of birthmarks he had lived with his entire life. Victoria's eyes followed the movement, a flicker of emotion crossing her face. "The doctors told them that the baby, that you, would be born with a rare genetic condition, one that would affect your appearance and potentially your health. Maxwell..." He panicked. He saw his carefully laid plans for the future crumbling before his eyes. Nathan felt a cold knot forming in the pit of his stomach. "So he decided to give me up." Victoria nodded slowly. "It wasn't an easy decision. Sarah was devastated. She wanted to keep you, to face whatever challenges came. But Maxwell, he could only see the obstacles, the potential for judgment and ridicule. He convinced Sarah that giving you up for adoption was the best choice for everyone." Nathan's mind was whirling. He thought of his adoptive parents, of the love and support they had given him throughout his life. And yet, the knowledge that his birth parents had given him up because of his appearance, it cut deep. "The locket," he said suddenly, his hand going to the silver chain around his neck. "Was it Sarah's idea?" Victoria confirmed. "She insisted on leaving you with something, a connection to your birth parents. The message inside, those were her words." Nathan felt tears pricking at the corners of his eyes. He blinked them away, forcing himself to focus. "Why are you telling me this now? Why not let Maxwell explain himself?" Victoria sighed, suddenly looking weary. "Because my brother is a coward, Dr. Foster. He spent the past 25 years building an empire, trying to outrun his guilt. Now that you're here, now that he's faced with the consequences of his choices, he's paralyzed." She leaned forward, her voice intense. "But you deserve to know the truth. And Maxwell. He needs to face this, for his own sake and for yours." Nathan sat back, feeling as though the wind had been knocked out of him. His entire life, his understanding of himself and his place in the world, had been turned upside down in the space of a few minutes. "What happens now?" he asked, his voice barely above a whisper. Victoria's gaze was steady. "That, Dr. Foster, is up to you. You have every right to be angry, to want nothing to do with Maxwell or the Blackwood family, but I hope you'll give him a chance to explain himself, to try and make amends, if that's even possible." As the first rays of sunlight began to filter through the cafeteria windows, Nathan Foster found himself at a crossroads. The truth he had sought for so long was finally within his grasp, but it came with a weight he wasn't sure he was prepared to bear. In that moment, as he sat across from the aunt he never knew he had, Nathan realized that the real journey was only just beginning. The path ahead was uncertain, fraught with emotional landmines and potential heartbreak. But it was also a path that could lead to understanding, to healing, and perhaps to a sense of belonging he had never quite felt before. With a deep breath, Nathan made his decision. "Take me to him," he said, his voice steady despite the turmoil in his heart. "It's time Maxwell and I had a long overdue conversation." Victoria nodded, a mix of relief and apprehension crossing her face. As they stood to leave, Nathan caught his reflection in the window. The birthmarks that had always set him apart now seemed like a map, leading him back to a past he never knew and forward to a future he could never have imagined. The truth, so long buried, was finally coming to light, and in its glare the lives of the Foster and Blackwood families would be forever changed. The walk back to Maxwell Blackwood's hospital room felt like the longest journey of Nathan Foster's life. Each step brought him closer to a confrontation he had both longed for and dreaded. Victoria Blackwood walked beside him, her presence a silent reminder of the complexities that lay ahead. As they approached the room, Dr. Elizabeth Chen intercepted them, her eyes widening at the sight of Nathan and Victoria together. "I see you two have met," she said, her voice carefully neutral. "Nathan, are you sure you're ready for this?" Nathan nodded, his jaw set with determination. "I've been ready my whole life, Dr. Chen. I just didn't know it until now." Elizabeth exchanged a glance with Victoria before stepping aside. "All right, but remember, Maxwell is still recovering. Try to keep things calm." With a deep breath, Nathan pushed open the door to room 305. Maxwell Blackwood was sitting up in bed, staring out the window. At the sound of the door, he turned, his eyes widening as he took in the sight of Nathan and Victoria entering together. "Vicky?" Maxwell's voice was a mix of confusion and dawning realization. "What's going on?" Victoria moved to her brother's bedside, her voice uncharacteristically gentle. "It's time, Max. No more hiding, no more running from the past." Maxwell's gaze shifted to Nathan, and in that moment the resemblance between them was undeniable. The same strong jawline, the same intense eyes. Even with Nathan's distinctive birthmarks, the family connection was clear. "Dr. Foster," Maxwell began, his voice shaking slightly, I owe you an explanation." Nathan stepped forward, his heart pounding. "Yes, you do, but first I need to hear you say it. I need to hear the truth from you." The room fell silent, the weight of 25 years of secrets hanging heavy in the air. Maxwell closed his eyes for a moment, as if gathering strength. When he opened them again, they were filled with a mixture of regret and resolve. "Nathan," he said, the name feeling foreign yet right on his tongue. "I'm your father." The words, so long unspoken, seemed to echo in the small hospital room. Nathan felt a rush of emotions: anger, relief, confusion, and a strange sense of completion. He sank into the chair by Maxwell's bed, suddenly feeling weak-kneed. "Why?" The question came out as barely more than a whisper. "Why did you give me up?" Maxwell's face contorted with pain, emotional rather than physical. "I was young, ambitious, and terrified. When the doctors told us about your condition, I panicked. I saw all my plans, all my dreams for the future, crumbling. I convinced myself and your mother that giving you up was the best choice for everyone." Nathan's hand went to the locket around his neck. "And was this your idea of compensation?" Maxwell shook his head, tears forming in his eyes. "That was your mother's idea. Sarah, she never wanted to give you up. The message inside, those were her words. She wanted you to know that you were loved, even if we couldn't be there for you." Victoria, who had been standing silently by the window, spoke up. "Nathan, you have to understand. What Maxwell and Sarah did, it wasn't easy for them. They struggled with the decision for a long time." Nathan turned to her, his voice sharp. "And what about you? Did you agree with their decision?" Victoria met his gaze steadily. "At the time, yes. We all thought it was for the best. But Nathan, not a day has gone by that we haven't thought about you, wondered where you were, if you were happy." Nathan stood abruptly, pacing the small room. His mind was a whirlwind of conflicting emotions. He thought of his adoptive parents, of the love and support they had given him throughout his life. He thought of the countless nights he had spent wondering about his birth parents, imagining scenarios of why they had given him up. "Do you know what it's like?" he asked, his voice low and intense. "To grow up different, to face stares and whispers everywhere you go, to wonder if your own parents gave you up because they couldn't bear to look at you." Maxwell flinched at the words, pain etched across his face. "Nathan, I can't imagine what you've been through. What I did, it was the biggest mistake of my life. Not a day goes by that I don't regret it." Nathan stopped pacing, turning to face Maxwell. "And now that you know who I am, what I've become despite your abandonment, what do you want?" Maxwell reached out a trembling hand. "A chance," he said, his voice breaking. "A chance to know you, to try and make amends. I know I don't deserve it, but you're my son, and I want to be a part of your life if you'll let me." The room fell silent as Nathan grappled with the weight of Maxwell's words. He thought of the life he had built for himself, of the challenges he had overcome. He thought of his adoptive parents, who had loved him unconditionally, and he thought of the empty space inside him that had always yearned for answers. Finally, Nathan spoke, his voice quiet but firm. "I can't forgive you. Not yet. What you did, it's shaped my entire life. But," he paused, taking a deep breath, "but I'm willing to try and understand, to see if there's a place for you, for all of you, in my life." Relief washed over Maxwell's face, while Victoria let out a breath she hadn't realized she'd been holding. The tension in the room eased slightly, replaced by a cautious sense of hope. "Thank you," Maxwell said softly. "That's more than I deserve." Nathan nodded, suddenly feeling exhausted. "I need some time to process all of this, but I'll be back. We have a lot to talk about." As Nathan turned to leave, Maxwell called out, "Nathan, I'm proud of you, of the man you've become. I know I had no part in it, but I'm proud to call you my son." Nathan paused at the door, his hand on the handle. Without turning back, he said, "I'm proud of who I am too, and that's thanks to the parents who raised me, who loved me unconditionally. Remember that, Mr. Blackwood." With that, he left the room, leaving Maxwell and Victoria to grapple with the aftermath of the truth finally revealed. In the hallway, Nathan leaned against the wall, feeling as though his world had been turned upside down. "Doctor." Chen approached, concern etched on her face. "Nathan, are you all right?" He looked at her, a wry smile touching his lips. "I'm not sure, Dr. Chen. I'm not sure I'll ever be all right again. But I think I'm on the path to something. Understanding, maybe, or healing." Elizabeth nodded, placing a comforting hand on his shoulder. "It's a lot to take in. Take some time off, Nathan. Process this. And remember, you have support here. You're not alone in this." As Nathan made his way out of the hospital, the New York morning was in full swing. The city bustled around him, oblivious to the life-altering revelations that had just taken place. He looked up at the towering buildings, symbols of the empire his biological father had built. For the first time, Nathan felt a connection to this city that went beyond his work at the hospital. It was a connection rooted in blood and history, complicated and fraught with emotion. As he hailed a taxi, Nathan realized that his journey of self-discovery was far from over. In fact, it was just beginning. The taxi pulled away from the curb, carrying Nathan towards an uncertain future. Behind him, in room 305, Maxwell Blackwood stared out the window, watching his son disappear into the New York crowd. The past had finally caught up with them all, and the future, for better or worse, would be shaped by the truths revealed on this fateful morning. The New York cityscape blurred past the taxi window as Nathan Foster sat in stunned silence, his mind reeling from the morning's revelations. The cab driver, sensing his passenger's mood, refrained from the usual small talk, leaving Nathan alone with his thoughts. As the taxi wound its way through the bustling streets, Nathan's hand went to the locket around his neck. For so long it had been a mystery, a tangible link to a past he could never quite grasp. Now, knowing its origin, the weight of it seemed to increase tenfold. "You can pull over here," Nathan said suddenly, spotting a familiar park. The driver obliged, and Nathan found himself stepping out onto the sidewalk, drawn to the very place where just days ago he had seen Maxwell Blackwood standing lost in thought. The park was quiet at this hour, the morning joggers and dog walkers yet to arrive in force. Nathan made his way to a bench, sinking down onto it with a heavy sigh. The events of the past few days played through his mind like a surreal movie. He thought of his adoptive parents, John and Mary Foster. They had never hidden the fact that he was adopted, always encouraging his curiosity about his origins. But they had also loved him fiercely, unconditionally, never once making him feel less than their own flesh and blood. With trembling hands, Nathan pulled out his phone. He needed to hear their voices to anchor himself in the love that had shaped him into the man he was today. "Nathan?" His mother's voice, warm and familiar, came through the speaker. "Sweetheart, is everything all right? You never call this early." Nathan felt tears pricking at the corners of his eyes. "Mom," he said, his voice cracking slightly. I found them. My birth parents." There was a moment of silence on the other end of the line. Then, "Oh, Nathan, are you okay? Do you need us to come to New York?" The immediate offer of support, the unconditional love in her voice, broke something open inside Nathan. The tears he had been holding back began to fall freely. "I don't know, Mom," he admitted, his voice barely above a whisper. "I don't know how I feel. They gave me up because of my birthmarks, because they were afraid of how it would affect their lives, their careers." He heard his mother's sharp intake of breath, could almost see the mixture of pain and anger that would be crossing her face. "Nathan, listen to me," she said, her voice firm but gentle. "You are the most incredible person I know. Your father and I have been blessed every single day since you came into our lives. Whatever reasons your birth parents had, whatever mistakes they made, they don't define you. You've defined yourself through your compassion, your brilliance, and your strength." Nathan nodded even though she couldn't see him. "I know, Mom, I always wondered, you know? And now that I know, I'm not sure it's any better." "Of course it isn't, sweetheart," his mother said softly. "Learning something like this, it's bound to shake you. But remember, you're not alone in this. Your father and we're here for you, always." They talked for a while longer, Nathan pouring out the details of his meeting with Maxwell and Victoria. His mother listened patiently, offering words of comfort and support. By the time they said goodbye, Nathan felt a little steadier, a little more grounded. As he ended the call, Nathan noticed that the park had begun to fill up. Parents with strollers, elderly couples on their morning walks, young professionals hurrying to work with coffee cups in hand. Life in New York, carrying on as always, oblivious to the personal dramas unfolding in its midst. Nathan's phone buzzed with a text message. It was from Dr. Chen. "Take all the time you need, Nathan. Your surgeries have been reassigned. Remember, you have support here too. Call if you need anything." He smiled slightly, grateful for Elizabeth's understanding and support. Then, almost as an afterthought, he opened his browser and typed in Maxwell Blackwood. The search results were overwhelming. News articles, business profiles, charity gala photos, all painting a picture of a man who had shaped the very skyline of New York. Nathan found himself clicking through the images, searching for hints of himself in Maxwell's features. One photo in particular caught his attention. It was from about 25 years ago, showing a much younger Maxwell at a construction site. Beside him stood a beautiful young woman with long dark hair and a radiant smile. The caption read, "Maxwell Blackwood and fiancée Sarah Reeves at the groundbreaking of Blackwood Tower." Sarah Reeves, his mother's name. Nathan stared at the image, drinking in every detail of the woman who had given birth to him, who had insisted on leaving him the locket as a connection to his past. As he studied the photo, Nathan's eyes were drawn to Sarah's neck. There, glinting in the sunlight, was a locket identical to the one he wore. The sight of it hit him like a physical blow, driving home the reality of his situation in a way nothing else had. These people, Maxwell, Sarah, Victoria, they weren't just abstract concepts anymore. They were real, flesh and blood, with their own hopes, dreams and failings. And like it or not, Nathan was inextricably linked to them. As the morning sun climbed higher in the sky, Nathan Foster sat in the park, grappling with the complexities of his newfound identity. He was Dr. Nathan Foster, brilliant neurosurgeon, beloved son of John and Mary Foster, but he was also the son of Maxwell Blackwood and Sarah Reeves, a living testament to choices made long ago. The path ahead was uncertain, fraught with emotional landmines and potential heartbreak. But as Nathan watched the diverse tapestry of New York life unfold around him, he felt a flicker of something like hope. He had faced challenges all his life, had overcome the stares and whispers, had forged his own path. This, he realized, was just another challenge to overcome. Another opportunity to define himself on his own terms. With a deep breath, Nathan stood, his decision made. He would face this head-on as he had faced every other obstacle in his life. He would give Maxwell and Victoria a chance to be part of his life, but on his terms. And through it all, he would hold tight to the love and support of the family that had chosen him, that had loved him unconditionally from the start. As Nathan hailed another taxi to take him home, he felt a sense of purpose settling over him. The future was uncertain, but for the first time in days he felt ready to face it. Whatever came next, Nathan Foster was determined to meet it with the strength, compassion, and resilience that had defined his life so far. The taxi pulled away from the curb, carrying Nathan towards a future that was both familiar and utterly new. Behind him, the park continued its morning rhythm, a microcosm of the city that had shaped him, the city that now held both his past and his future in its sprawling embrace. The Blackwood Industries boardroom was unnaturally quiet, the usual buzz of activity replaced by a tense silence. Victoria Blackwood stood at the head of the table, her posture rigid, her eyes scanning the faces of the executives gathered before her. "I know there have been rumors," she began, her voice steady and authoritative. "Speculation about Maxwell's condition, about the future of the company. I'm here to put those rumors to rest." She paused, allowing her words to sink in. The executives leaned forward, hungry for information. "Maxwell is recovering well," Victoria continued. "The surgery was successful, and he's expected to make a full recovery. However," she held up a hand to forestall the murmur of relief that had begun to ripple through the room, "there have been developments that will impact the company moving forward." A ripple of unease passed through the room. Victoria took a deep breath, steeling herself for what came next. 25 years ago, Maxwell made a decision, a personal decision that we believed at the time would never affect Blackwood Industries. We were wrong. The confusion on the executives' faces was palpable. Victoria pressed on, her voice unwavering. "Maxwell has a son he gave up for adoption 25 years ago. That son is Dr. Nathan Foster, the surgeon who saved Maxwell's life." The room erupted into chaos. Questions flew from all directions, voices rising in a cacophony of shock and disbelief. Victoria raised her hands, calling for silence. "I understand this is a lot to take in," she said, her tone brooking no argument. "But the fact remains, Nathan Foster is Maxwell Blackwood's biological son, and while we don't know yet what this means for the company, we need to be prepared for all possibilities." One of the older executives, a man who had been with the company almost since its inception, spoke up. "Victoria, with all due respect, how can we be sure this Dr. Foster is who he says he is? This could be an elaborate ploy to..." "To what, Harold?" Victoria cut him off, her eyes flashing. "To save Maxwell's life and then reveal himself as his long-lost son? I was there when Maxwell and Sarah made the decision to give him up. I've seen the DNA test results. Nathan Foster is without a doubt Maxwell's son." The room fell silent again, the weight of this revelation settling heavily on everyone present. "What does this mean for the succession plan?" another executive ventured. "Is Dr. Foster going to be brought into the company?" Victoria shook her head. "At this point, we don't know. Nathan has his own career, his own life. He's only just learned about his connection to Maxwell. Any decisions about his involvement with Blackwood Industries will be made further down the line, with careful consideration and in consultation with all relevant parties." She looked around the room, meeting each executive's gaze in turn. "What I need from all of you right now is discretion. This information does not leave this room. We will craft an official statement to be released at the appropriate time. Until then, it's business as usual. Is that understood?" A murmur of assent rippled through the room. Victoria nodded, satisfied for the moment. "Good. Now let's move on to the quarterly projections." As the meeting shifted to more familiar territory, Victoria felt a weight lift from her shoulders. The hardest part was over. The truth was out, at least within these walls. Now came the challenge of navigating the choppy waters ahead. Across town, in the quiet of his apartment, Nathan Foster sat at his desk, staring at his computer screen. He had spent the past few hours diving deep into the world of Maxwell Blackwood and Blackwood Industries, trying to understand the man who had given him life and then given him up. The more he read, the more overwhelming it all became. Maxwell wasn't just successful. He was a titan of industry, a man who had reshaped the very skyline of New York. His philanthropic efforts were well documented, his business acumen legendary. And yet Nathan couldn't reconcile this public image with the man he had met in the hospital room, the man who had looked at him with a mixture of regret, fear, and desperate hope. A knock at the door startled Nathan from his thoughts. He opened it to find Elizabeth Chen standing in the hallway, a concerned look on her face. "Elizabeth," Nathan said, surprised. "What are you doing here?" "Checking on you," she replied, her tone gentle but firm. "You haven't answered any of my calls or texts. I was worried." Nathan stepped aside, letting her in. "I'm sorry, I've been distracted." Elizabeth looked around the apartment, taking in the scattered papers and empty coffee cups. "I can see that. Have you eaten anything today?" Nathan shook his head, suddenly realizing how long it had been since his last meal. Elizabeth sighed, moving towards the kitchen. "Sit down," she instructed. "I'm making you something to eat, and then we're going to talk." As Elizabeth busied herself in the kitchen, Nathan sank onto his couch, suddenly feeling the weight of the past few days crashing down on him. "I don't know what to do, Elizabeth," he admitted, his voice barely above a whisper. "How am I supposed to process all of this?" Elizabeth paused in her cooking, turning to look at him. "One step at a time, Nathan. That's all any of us can do." She brought over a plate of scrambled eggs and toast, setting it in front of him. "Eat. You need your strength." As Nathan ate, Elizabeth sat beside him, her presence a comforting anchor in the storm of his emotions. "You know," she said after a while, "I've known Maxwell for a long time. I was there all those years ago when he and Sarah made the decision to give you up." Nathan looked up sharply. "You were?" Elizabeth nodded, her eyes distant with memory. "I didn't agree with their decision. I thought they were making a terrible mistake, but I understood their fear, their uncertainty." She turned to Nathan, her gaze intense. "What they did was wrong, Nathan. They let fear guide them instead of love. But I want you to know it wasn't because they didn't love you, especially Sarah. She fought hard to keep you." Nathan felt a lump forming in his throat. "Then why did she give in?" Elizabeth sighed. "Because she believed Maxwell when he said it was for the best, that you would have a better life with a family who could give you everything they couldn't." She reached out, placing a hand on Nathan's arm. "I'm not telling you this to excuse their actions, but I think if you're going to move forward, if you're going to find a way to have Maxwell in your life, you need to understand where he was coming from." Nathan nodded slowly, processing her words. "And Sarah? Do you know what happened to her?" A shadow passed over Elizabeth's face. Sarah passed away a few years after you were born. A car accident. It destroyed Maxwell. I think that's when he really began to regret his decision. The news hit Nathan like a physical blow. The mother he had just discovered, the woman whose face he had studied in that old photograph, was gone. He would never have the chance to meet her, to hear her side of the story. "I'm so sorry, Nathan," Elizabeth said softly. "I know this is a lot to take in." Nathan nodded, unable to speak past the lump in his throat. They sat in silence for a while, the weight of the past hanging heavy between them. Finally, Nathan spoke. "What do I do now, Elizabeth? How do I move forward from here?" Elizabeth squeezed his arm gently. "You do what you've always done, Nathan. You face it head on. You've overcome so much in your life. This is just another challenge, and remember, you're not alone. You have your adoptive parents, you have me, and if you want it, you have Maxwell and Victoria too." Nathan looked at her, a small smile touching his lips. "When did you get so wise?" Elizabeth laughed softly. "Oh, I've always been wise. Always. You're just finally starting to notice." As the afternoon light began to fade, casting long shadows across Nathan's apartment, he felt a sense of calm settling over him. The road ahead was still uncertain, fraught with emotional pitfalls and potential heartbreak. But for the first time since learning the truth about his origins, Nathan felt like he could face it. He had survived being given up. He had thrived despite the challenges his appearance had presented. He had become a renowned surgeon, saving lives and making a difference in the world. This, he realized, was just another chapter in his story, a chance to redefine family, to explore connections he never knew he had, and perhaps to find healing for wounds he hadn't even known he carried. As Elizabeth prepared to leave, Nathan stopped her at the door. "Thank you," he said simply, "for everything." She smiled, pulling him into a quick hug. "Any time, Nathan. Remember, you're not just my colleague, you're my friend. And friends stand by each other, no matter what." After she left, Nathan returned to his computer. But instead of diving back into research about Maxwell Blackwood, he opened his email and began to type, "Dear Mr. Blackwood, I've had some time to think about our conversation. While I'm not ready to forgive or to welcome you into my life with open arms, I am willing to talk. To try and understand, if you're open to it, I'd like to meet again. Not as doctor and patient, but as whatever we are to each other now. Let me know if you're willing. Nathan Foster." His finger hovered over the send button for a long moment. Then, with a deep breath, he clicked it. The email disappeared into the digital ether, carrying with it the potential for a new beginning. The soft glow of the hospital room's nightlight cast long shadows across Maxwell Blackwood's face as he stared at the email on his tablet. His finger hovered over the reply button, trembling slightly. Nathan's words echoed in his mind. "Not as doctor and patient, but as whatever we are to each other now." Maxwell closed his eyes, memories washing over him like a tidal wave. He saw Sarah's face, radiant with joy as she told him she was pregnant. He remembered the fear that had gripped him when they learned of their child's condition, the sleepless nights spent agonizing over what to do. And he relived, with painful clarity, the moment he had placed his newborn son in a nurse's arms, turning away before he could change his mind. A gentle knock at the door roused Maxwell from his reverie. Victoria entered, her usually impeccable appearance slightly disheveled from a long day at the office. "Max," she said softly, taking in the conflicted expression on her brother's face. "What is it?" Wordlessly, Maxwell handed her the tablet. Victoria's eyes widened as she read Nathan's email. "He wants to meet," she breathed, a mix of hope and apprehension in her voice. "Max, this is good. It's a chance to..." "To what, Vicky?" Maxwell interrupted, his voice hoarse with emotion. "To explain why I abandoned my own son? To beg forgiveness for a decision I can never take back?" Victoria sat on the edge of the bed, taking her brother's hand in hers. "To start healing," she said firmly. "Both of you." Maxwell shook his head, tears welling in his eyes. "I don't deserve healing. What I did, it's unforgivable." "Maybe so," Victoria agreed, her tone gentle but unyielding. "But Nathan is offering you a chance, Max. A chance to explain, to understand each other. Don't throw that away because you think you don't deserve it." She squeezed his hand, her voice softening. "Remember what Mom used to say. It's not about deserving, it's about what you do with the chances you're given." A ghost of a smile touched Maxwell's lips at the memory of their mother's wisdom. He looked at Victoria, seeing not just his sister and business partner, but the young girl who had stood by him through every crisis, every triumph. "What would I do without you, Vicky?" he murmured. She smirked, some of her usual spark returning. "Crash and burn, obviously. Now, are you going to reply to that email, or do I need to do it for you?" Maxwell chuckled weakly, reaching for the tablet. No, I'll do it. Just give me a moment." Victoria nodded, standing to leave. At the door, she paused, turning back to her brother. "Max, I'm proud of you. This isn't easy, but you're facing it. That's more than you did 25 years ago." As the door closed behind her, Maxwell took a deep breath, fingers poised over the keyboard. After a moment's hesitation, he began to type, "Dear Nathan, thank you for reaching out. Your willingness to meet means more to me than I can express. I understand your reservations, and I respect your boundaries. I am open to meeting whenever and wherever you feel comfortable. My schedule is entirely flexible. I know that words cannot undo the past, but I hope that through our conversation, I can begin to explain, and perhaps, in time, make amends for the choices I made. Thank you for this opportunity. Sincerely, Maxwell Blackwood." He read the email over several times, agonizing over each word. Finally, with a mixture of fear and hope, he pressed send. Across the city, in his apartment, Nathan's phone buzzed with the incoming email. He had been pacing nervously since sending his message, half hoping for and half dreading a response. Now, Seeing Maxwell's name in his inbox, he felt a surge of conflicting emotions. With trembling hands, he opened the email. As he read Maxwell's words, he found himself analyzing every sentence, searching for sincerity, for regret, for any sign of the father he had never known. Nathan sank onto his couch, the weight of the situation settling heavily on his shoulders. He had initiated this, had opened the door to a relationship he wasn't sure he was ready for. But as he reread the email, he felt a flicker of something like hope. Picking up his phone, he dialed a familiar number. "Mom," he said when the call connected, "I need your advice." For the next hour, Nathan poured out his heart to Mary Foster, the woman who had raised him, loved him, and supported him through every challenge. He told her about the email he had sent, about Maxwell's response, about the turmoil of emotions swirling inside him. Mary listened patiently, offering words of comfort and wisdom. When Nathan finally fell silent, she spoke, her voice filled with love and understanding. "Nathan, sweetheart, this is your decision. Your father and I will support you no matter what you choose. But remember this, meeting with Maxwell doesn't mean you have to forgive him. It doesn't mean you have to let him into your life if you're not ready. It's just a conversation, a chance to understand." Nathan nodded, even though she couldn't see him. "I know, Mom, I'm scared. What if I learn something I can't unhear? What if it changes how I see myself?" "Oh, honey," Mary said softly, "you are who you are because of the choices you've made, the challenges you've overcome. Nothing Maxwell Blackwood says can change that. You're our son, Nathan. That will never change, no matter what you learn about your birth parents." Tears welled in Nathan's eyes at her words. "I love you, Mom," he whispered. "We love you too, sweetheart. Always." After ending the call, Nathan sat in silence for a long moment, gathering his thoughts. Then, with a deep breath, he began to type a reply to Maxwell. "Mr. Blackwood, thank you for your prompt response. I appreciate your willingness to meet on my terms. I suggest we meet at the park near St. Mary's Hospital this Saturday at 2 p.m. It's a public place, but should afford us enough privacy for our conversation. I want to be clear. This meeting doesn't guarantee forgiveness or a future relationship. It's a chance for us to talk, to understand each other's perspectives. Nothing more, nothing less. Please confirm if this works for you. Nathan Foster." As he hit send, Nathan felt a strange mix of anxiety and anticipation. Saturday was just 3 days away. In 3 days, he would sit face to face with the man who had given him life and then given him up. The man whose decision had shaped the course of Nathan's entire existence. As the night deepened outside his window, Nathan found himself standing before his mirror, studying the intricate pattern of birthmarks that covered the left side of his face. For so long, these marks had been a source of pain, of differentness, but they had also made him who he was, resilient, compassionate, determined to prove his worth beyond his appearance. Now, as he traced the familiar patterns with his fingers, Nathan saw something else in those marks. He saw a connection to a past he had never known, a link to the parents who had brought him into this world. For better or worse, these marks were his heritage, a physical manifestation of the complex tapestry of his origins. With a deep breath, Nathan turned away from the mirror. Whatever Saturday's meeting would bring, he was ready to face it. He was Dr. Nathan Foster, brilliant neurosurgeon, beloved son of John and Mary Foster, and now the son of Maxwell Blackwood and Sarah Reeves. As he prepared for bed, Nathan felt a sense of calm settling over him. The road ahead was uncertain, but he would walk it with the strength and dignity that had carried him through every other challenge in his life. Saturday would come, and with it, the beginning of a new chapter in the intertwined stories of the Foster and Blackwood families. The Saturday sun hung high in a cloudless sky as Nathan Foster made his way through the park near St. Mary's Hospital. His steps were measured, deliberate, each one bringing him closer to a confrontation he had both longed for and dreaded his entire life. He spotted Maxwell Blackwood long before he reached their agreed-upon meeting spot. The older man sat on a bench, his usually impeccable business attire replaced by casual slacks and a polo shirt. Even in this relaxed setting, Maxwell exuded an aura of power and influence, his posture straight, his gaze alert as it scanned the park. As Nathan approached, he saw the moment Maxwell recognized him. The older man's eyes widened slightly. a complex mix of emotions flashing across his face: hope, fear, regret, and something that looked almost like pride. "Mr. Blackwood," Nathan said, his voice steady despite the tumult of emotions roiling inside him. Maxwell stood, extending his hand almost reflexively before seeming to think better of it. "Nathan," he replied, his voice rough with emotion. "Thank you for coming. Please sit." They settled on the bench, an awkward silence stretching between them. Around them, the park buzzed with life. Children laughing on the playground, joggers pounding the paths, couples strolling hand in hand. The normalcy of the scene stood in stark contrast to the weight of the moment unfolding between father and son. "I'm not sure where to begin," Maxwell admitted after a long moment. Nathan nodded, his gaze fixed on a distant point. "Why don't we start with why? Why did you give me up?" Maxwell took a deep breath, his hands clasping tightly in his lap. "I wish I had a better answer for you, Nathan. The truth is I was young, ambitious, and terrified. When the doctors told us about your condition, all I could see were obstacles. I convinced myself and your mother that giving you up was the best choice for everyone." He paused, his voice dropping to barely above a whisper. "It was the biggest mistake of my life." Nathan turned to look at Maxwell, really look at him for the first time. He saw the lines of regret etched deeply into the older man's face, the haunted look in eyes that had seen too much success and too little joy. "Did you ever try to find me?" Nathan asked, surprised by the hint of hope in his own voice. Maxwell nodded, a sad smile touching his lips. "Every year on your birthday. But the adoption was closed, the record sealed. I hired private investigators, made discreet inquiries, but nothing. It was like you had vanished into thin air." He reached into his pocket, pulling out a worn photograph. "This is all I had," he said, holding it out to Nathan. With trembling hands, Nathan took the photo. It showed a newborn baby, his face marked with the same intricate pattern of birthmarks that Nathan saw in the mirror every day. Cradling the baby was a beautiful young woman with long dark hair and a radiant, if tearful, smile. "Your mother," Maxwell said softly. "Sarah, she never wanted to give you up. She fought me on it until the very end." Nathan traced his finger over Sarah's face, drinking in every detail. "What happened to her?" he asked, though he already knew the answer from his conversation with Elizabeth. Maxwell's face contorted with pain. "She passed away in a car accident when you were 3. I think losing you broke something in her. She was never the same after we gave you up." A heavy silence fell between them, broken only by the distant laughter of children and the rustle of leaves in the gentle breeze. "I know I have no right to ask this," Maxwell said after a while, "but can you tell me about your life, your adoptive parents? I need to know that you were loved, that you were happy." Nathan considered the request for a long moment. Part of him wanted to refuse, to deny Maxwell any knowledge of the life he had forfeited the right to be part of. But another part, the part that had always yearned for this connection, found itself wanting to share. "John and Mary Foster," Nathan began, a small smile touching his lips. "They adopted me when I was 3 months old. They never hid the fact that I was adopted, but they also never made me feel like I was anything less than their son." He paused, memories washing over him. "They supported me through everything. The stares, the whispers, the challenges that came with looking different. They encouraged my interest in medicine, celebrated every achievement no matter how small." Maxwell listened intently, hanging on every word. Nathan could see the mixture of relief and regret playing across the older man's face. "They sound wonderful," Maxwell said softly. I'm glad you had them." Nathan nodded, feeling a surge of love and gratitude for the Fosters. "They are wonderful. They're my parents in every way that matters." The words hung in the air between them, a gentle but firm reminder of the reality of their situation. Maxwell nodded, understanding and acceptance in his eyes. "Nathan," he said, his voice thick with emotion, "I know I have no right to ask for forgiveness. What I did, it's unforgivable. But I want you to know that not a day has gone by that I haven't regretted my decision, that I haven't wondered about you, worried about you, hoped that you were happy and loved." He reached into his pocket again, pulling out a small, ornate box. "I've carried this with me every day for 25 years, he said, opening the box to reveal a delicate silver chain with a locket identical to the one Nathan wore. "Sarah's locket," Nathan breathed, recognizing it from the old photograph he had seen. Maxwell nodded. "She wanted you to have hers to keep a part of her with you always. I've kept mine as a reminder of what I lost, of the mistakes I made." He held out the box to Nathan. "I'd like you to have it, not as a way to buy your forgiveness, but as a connection to your mother, to the woman who loved you from the moment she knew you existed." Nathan stared at the locket, emotions warring within him. Slowly, he reached out and took the box, cradling it gently in his hands. "Thank you," he said softly. I don't know what to say." Maxwell shook his head. "You don't have to say anything. I know this doesn't change the past. It doesn't erase what I did. But I hope it can be a start. A beginning, if you're willing." Nathan looked at Maxwell, really looked at him. He saw a man broken by regret, desperate for a chance at redemption. He saw flashes of himself in the set of Maxwell's jaw, the shape of his eyes. And he saw, for the first time, the possibility of a future that included this complicated, flawed man who was his biological father. "I can't promise anything," Nathan said carefully. It's a lot to process, but I'm willing to try to see where this goes." Relief and hope bloomed on Maxwell's face. "That's more than I deserve," he said. "Thank you, Nathan, for giving me this chance." As the afternoon sun began its descent, casting long shadows across the park, father and son sat in a silence that was no longer awkward but thoughtful. The weight of the past still hung between them, but now there was also a glimmer of possibility, a fragile bridge beginning to form across the chasm of 25 years. Nathan knew that the road ahead would be challenging. There would be more difficult conversations, more painful truths to face. He would have to navigate the complexities of building a relationship with Maxwell while honoring the love and devotion of the Fosters. But as he sat there, the locket of his birth mother in his hands and the man who had given him life beside him, Nathan felt a sense of peace settling over him. He had faced the truth of his origins, had looked his past in the eye. Whatever came next, he would face it with the strength and resilience that had defined his life so far. As they stood to leave, Maxwell hesitated, then spoke softly. "Nathan, I know I have no right to say this, but I'm proud of you, of the man you've become, of all you've accomplished. I know I had no part in it, but I'm proud to call you my son." Nathan nodded, emotions tightening his throat. He couldn't bring himself to reciprocate the sentiment. Not yet. But he managed a small smile, a silent acknowledgement of Maxwell's words. As they parted ways, each heading back to their respective lives, both Nathan and Maxwell knew that this was not an ending, but a beginning. A first step on a long and uncertain journey towards understanding, forgiveness, and perhaps in time, a true father-son relationship. The weeks following Nathan and Maxwell's meeting in the park passed in a blur of tentative text messages, brief phone calls, and cautious steps towards understanding. For Nathan, it was a period of intense introspection, each interaction with Maxwell forcing him to confront long-buried emotions and re-examine his sense of identity. One crisp autumn morning, Nathan found himself in the familiar surroundings of the operating room at St. Mary's Hospital. As he prepared for a particularly challenging surgery, he couldn't help but reflect on how much his life had changed in such a short time. "Dr. Foster," the anesthesiologist's voice broke through his reverie. "The patient is ready." Nathan nodded, taking a deep breath as he focused on the task at hand. This was where he felt most at home, most himself. Here in the operating room, he wasn't Nathan Foster, the abandoned son of Maxwell Blackwood. He was simply Dr. Foster, a brilliant neurosurgeon with steady hands and unwavering focus. As he made the first incision, Nathan felt the familiar sense of calm wash over him. The complexity of the procedure demanded his full attention, leaving no room for the emotional turmoil that had been his constant companion in recent weeks. Hours passed in what felt like minutes. As Nathan made the final, delicate adjustments, a hush fell over the operating room. With a barely audible sigh of relief, he stepped back. "We're done," he announced. "Excellent work, everyone." As the team began the post-op procedures, Nathan stripped off his surgical gown and gloves. The rush of adrenaline that always followed a successful surgery coursed through him, momentarily pushing aside his personal concerns. Outside the operating room, he was surprised to find Elizabeth Chen waiting for him. "Elizabeth," he greeted her, curiosity coloring his tone. "What brings you down here?" She smiled, though Nathan could see the hint of concern in her eyes. "I wanted to check in on you. We haven't had much chance to talk lately, with everything that's been going on." Nathan nodded, suddenly feeling the weight of the past few weeks settling back onto his shoulders. "It's been intense," he admitted. "Why don't we grab some coffee?" Elizabeth suggested. "I think we both could use a break." They made their way to the hospital cafeteria, each lost in their own thoughts. As they settled at a quiet corner table with their coffees, Elizabeth broke the silence. "How are things going with Maxwell?" she asked gently. Nathan sighed, running a hand through his hair. "It's complicated. We've been talking, texting, trying to get to know each other, I guess. But it's hard. Every conversation feels like navigating a minefield." Elizabeth nodded sympathetically. "That's understandable. You're both carrying a lot of history, a lot of pain." "It's not just that," Nathan said, frustration evident in his voice. I look at him, and I see parts of myself. The way he gestures when he speaks, the sound of his laugh. It's like looking in a funhouse mirror, and then I remember what he did, and I feel this surge of anger and hurt all over again." Elizabeth reached out, placing a comforting hand on Nathan's arm. "Nathan, healing takes time. You can't force forgiveness, and you can't expect to resolve 25 years of absence overnight." Nathan nodded, grateful for her understanding. "I know. It's just, I feel like I'm being pulled in so many directions. I have my life, my career, my identity as Dr. Nathan Foster. And now there's this whole other side of me that I'm just beginning to explore. The son of Maxwell Blackwood, heir to a corporate empire. And how do you feel about that?" Elizabeth probed gently. "The Blackwood legacy?" Nathan shook his head, a wry smile touching his lips. "Honestly, I have no idea. Maxwell keeps hinting at bringing me into the company, talking about family legacy and birthright. But that's not me, Elizabeth. I'm a doctor. I save lives. I can't imagine giving that up to sit in a boardroom." Elizabeth's eyes sparkled with amusement. "I can't quite picture you in a suit and tie poring over quarterly reports," she teased. Nathan chuckled, some of the tension easing from his shoulders. "God, no, can you imagine? Dr. Foster, neurosurgeon turned corporate tycoon. It sounds like a bad TV movie." They shared a laugh, the moment of levity a welcome respite from the emotional weight of their conversation. As their laughter subsided, Elizabeth's expression turned serious once more. "Nathan," she said softly, "I want you to remember something. No matter what happens with Maxwell, no matter what you discover about your past or your Blackwood heritage, it doesn't change who you are at your core. You're still the brilliant, compassionate doctor who just saved a life in that operating room. You're still the man who has overcome so much to get where you are today." Nathan felt a lump forming in his throat at her words. "Thank you, Elizabeth," he said, his voice rough with emotion. "I needed to hear that." She squeezed his arm gently. "Anytime. And Nathan, don't forget that you have support. Your adoptive parents, me, your colleagues here at the hospital. You don't have to navigate this alone." As they finished their coffee, Nathan felt a sense of clarity settling over him. The road ahead was still uncertain, still fraught with emotional pitfalls. But Elizabeth's words had reminded him of an essential truth. He was more than his relationship with Maxwell, more than the Blackwood name. Leaving the cafeteria, Nathan's phone buzzed with a text from Maxwell. "Dinner this weekend? There's someone I'd like you to meet. MB." Nathan stared at the message, a mix of curiosity and apprehension swirling in his gut. Who could Maxwell want him to meet? Another family member? A business associate? With a deep breath, Nathan typed out his reply. "Saturday works for me. Send me the details. Neff." As he hit send, Nathan couldn't shake the feeling that he was stepping further into a world he wasn't sure he was ready for. But as he made his way back to his office, the weight of the stethoscope around his neck and the memory of the successful surgery he had just performed grounded him. Whatever came next, whatever revelations or challenges lay ahead, Nathan knew who he was. Dr. Nathan Foster, neurosurgeon, son of John and Mary Foster, and yes, biological son of Maxwell Blackwood and Sarah Reeves. It was a complex identity, but it was his, and he was ready to face whatever came next. As the hospital bustled around him, life and death decisions being made in every corridor, Nathan felt a renewed sense of purpose. His world might be changing, expanding in ways he never expected, but his core remained the same. He was a healer, a man dedicated to saving lives and making a difference. With that thought firmly in mind, Nathan turned his attention to his next patient, ready to face the challenges of the day with the same determination and skill that had defined his career. The Blackwood legacy, with all its complications and possibilities, could wait. For now he had lives to save, had lives. The exclusive restaurant atop one of New York's most iconic skyscrapers buzzed with the quiet energy of power and influence. Nathan Foster felt distinctly out of place as he stepped off the elevator. His simple button-down shirt and slacks, a stark contrast to the designer suits and evening gowns that surrounded him. A maitre d' approached, his expression a careful mask of polite inquiry. "Good evening, sir. Do you have a reservation?" Before Nathan could respond, a familiar voice called out, "He's with me, Antoine. Dr. Foster is my guest this evening." Maxwell Blackwood appeared at Nathan's side, looking every inch the corporate titan in a perfectly tailored suit. The maitre d's demeanor changed instantly, a deferential smile replacing his previous skepticism. "Of course, Mr. Blackwood. Right this way, gentlemen." As they followed Antoine to a secluded table with a breathtaking view of the New York skyline, Nathan couldn't help but feel a twinge of resentment at the power Maxwell's name carried. It was a world so far removed from the meritocracy of medicine, where respect was earned through skill and dedication, not inherited or bought. "I'm glad you could make it, Nathan," Maxwell said as they took their seats. "I know your schedule at the hospital is demanding." Nathan nodded, trying to quell the nervous energy that had been building since he received Maxwell's invitation. "You mentioned there was someone you wanted me to meet." A flicker of something, anticipation, anxiety, crossed Maxwell's face. "Yes, she should be joining us shortly. I thought it might be good for us to have a moment to talk first." Before Nathan could press for more details, a waiter appeared with a bottle of what was undoubtedly outrageously expensive wine. Maxwell ordered for both of them with the ease of someone accustomed to such luxuries, barely glancing at the menu. As the waiter retreated, an awkward silence fell between father and son. Nathan found himself studying Maxwell's face, searching for similarities to his own. The shape of the jaw, the set of the eyes, it was like looking at a possible future version of himself, minus the distinctive birthmarks. Maxwell cleared his throat, breaking the silence. "How have you been, Nathan?" "I know these past few weeks haven't been easy." Nathan took a sip of his wine, buying himself a moment to gather his thoughts. "It's been challenging," he said finally. "Trying to reconcile who I've always been with this new part of my identity. It's a lot to process." Maxwell nodded, understanding and a hint of guilt in his eyes. "I can only imagine. I want you to know, Nathan, that I don't expect anything from you. I'm just grateful for the chance to get to know you." Before Nathan could respond, he noticed Maxwell's gaze shift to a point over his shoulder, a smile breaking across his face. "Ah, here she is." Nathan turned, curious to see who this mystery guest could be. His heart nearly stopped as he took in the sight of the woman approaching their table. She was in her early 50s, with elegant silver streaks in her dark hair and a grace that turned heads as she moved through the restaurant. But it was her face that held Nathan transfixed. The high cheekbones, the shape of her eyes, the curve of her smile. It was like looking at an older version of the woman from the photograph, the woman cradling a newborn with distinctive birthmarks. "Nathan," Maxwell said softly, standing to greet the woman with a warm embrace. "I'd like you to meet Olivia Reeves, Sarah's younger sister." "Your aunt?" Olivia's eyes, so achingly familiar, filled with tears as she looked at Nathan. "Oh my," she breathed, her voice thick with emotion. "You look so much like her." Nathan stood on shaky legs, his mind reeling. An aunt. Another piece of his biological family he never knew existed. It's nice to meet you, Ms. Reeves," he managed, his usual eloquence deserting him. "Please call me Olivia," she said, reaching out to clasp his hands in hers. "I've waited so long for this moment, Nathan. To finally meet you, to see the wonderful man you've become." As they settled into their seats, Nathan felt as though he had stepped into a surreal dream. Here he was, dining with his biological father and the aunt he never knew he had, in a restaurant that probably cost more per meal than he made in a day at the hospital. "I hope you don't mind that I asked Olivia to join us," Maxwell said, a hint of nervousness in his tone. I thought you might like to know more about Sarah. About your mother." Nathan nodded, still too overwhelmed to form a coherent response. Olivia reached into her purse, pulling out a small photo album. "I brought some pictures," she said softly, "of Sarah, of your grandparents. I thought you might like to see them." With trembling hands, Nathan accepted the album. As he opened it, he found himself looking at a younger version of the woman sitting across from him, her arm around a painfully familiar face. Sarah, his mother. "That was taken the summer before she met Maxwell," Olivia explained, her voice warm with nostalgia. "Sarah was studying art history at Columbia. She had such a passion for beauty, for creating things." As Olivia continued to narrate the photos, painting a picture of the vibrant, creative woman Sarah had been, Nathan felt a complex mix of emotions washing over him. Grief for the mother he never knew, anger at the circumstances that had robbed him of the chance to know her, and a deep, aching curiosity to learn more. "She was so excited when she found out she was pregnant," Olivia said softly, her gaze flickering briefly to Maxwell. "She had such dreams for you, Nathan. She used to talk about the adventures you'd have together, the things she wanted to teach you." Nathan felt a lump forming in his throat. What happened?" he asked, his voice barely above a whisper. After I was born?" A heavy silence fell over the table. Maxwell shifted uncomfortably in his seat, while Olivia's expression turned sad. "Sarah was never the same after they gave you up," Olivia said gently. "It was like a light had gone out inside her. She threw herself into her work, traveled the world studying art and architecture. But there was always this sadness about her, this sense of something missing." Maxwell spoke up, his voice rough with emotion. "I tried to make it up to her, to give her everything she could ever want, but it wasn't enough," Olivia finished, a hint of old anger in her tone. "Nothing could fill the void left by losing you, Nathan." Nathan sat back, feeling as though the air had been sucked out of the room. He had always wondered about his birth parents, had imagined scenarios of why they had given him up. But hearing the reality, the pain and regret that had followed their decision, was almost too much to bear. "I'm sorry," he said finally, unsure who exactly he was apologizing to. "I need some air." He stood abruptly, nearly knocking over his chair in his haste to escape the suffocating weight of revelations and long-buried emotions. Ignoring the concerned calls of Maxwell and Olivia, Nathan made his way to the restaurant's balcony, gulping in the cool night air. The New York skyline stretched out before him, a glittering tapestry of lights and possibilities. Somewhere out there was the hospital where he had built his career, the apartment where he had crafted a life for himself, and here, high above the city, was a glimpse into a life that could have been, a family he never knew. As he stood there trying to reconcile the man he had always been with this new, expanding identity, Nathan felt a gentle hand on his shoulder. He turned to find Olivia standing beside him, her eyes filled with understanding and compassion. "It's a lot to take in, isn't it?" she said softly. Nathan nodded, unable to find words to express the turmoil inside him. "You know," Olivia continued, her gaze turning to the city below, "Sarah would be so proud of you, not just for your accomplishments, impressive as they are, but for the man you've become, for the strength and resilience you've shown." She turned back to him, reaching out to gently touch the birthmarks on his face. "These marks that some might see as a flaw? Sarah saw them as a sign of how special you were, how unique and beautiful." Nathan felt tears pricking at the corners of his eyes. I wish I could have known her," he said, his voice thick with emotion. Olivia smiled sadly. "So do I, Nathan. So do I. But know this, you were loved. From the moment Sarah knew of your existence, you were loved fiercely and completely. Nothing, not fear, not ambition, not even death could change that." As they stood there, aunt and nephew, the New York night enveloping them, Nathan felt something shift inside him. The anger and hurt were still there, the sense of loss for a life he never got to live. But alongside it was a growing understanding, a tentative acceptance of the complex tapestry of circumstances and choices that had led to this moment. He was Dr. Nathan Foster, brilliant neurosurgeon and beloved son of John and Mary Foster. He was the biological son of Maxwell Blackwood and Sarah Reeves, heir to a legacy he was only beginning to understand. And now he was also nephew to Olivia Reeves, connected to a family history he had never known. The following weeks passed in a whirlwind of emotions and revelations for Nathan Foster. His world, once neatly compartmentalized between his professional life as a neurosurgeon and his personal life as the adopted son of John and Mary Foster, had expanded in ways he could never have imagined. Regular dinners with Maxwell became a fixture in his schedule, each meeting a delicate dance of getting to know each other while navigating the minefield of their shared past. Olivia, too, had become a constant presence, eager to share stories and memories of Sarah, filling in the blanks of Nathan's family history. It was during one of these dinners, at a quiet Italian restaurant far removed from the opulence of their first meeting, that Maxwell broached a subject that had been simmering beneath the surface of their conversations. "Nathan," Maxwell began, his tone cautious, "I've been thinking about the future, about legacy." Nathan felt a familiar tension creep into his shoulders. He had been expecting this conversation, dreading it even. "Maxwell," he said, his voice steady, "if this is about Blackwood Industries—" Maxwell held up a hand, a rueful smile touching his lips. I know. You're a doctor, not a businessman. But hear me out, please." Nathan nodded, bracing himself for what was to come. "Blackwood Industries isn't just a company," Maxwell continued, his eyes intense. "It's a force for change. We've reshaped skylines, yes, but we've also invested in sustainable technologies, in community development projects. I believe we have the power to make a real difference in the world." He paused, taking a sip of his wine before continuing. "I'm not asking you to give up medicine, Nathan, but I'm asking you to consider taking a role in the company, perhaps heading up our medical technology division or our charitable foundation. Your expertise, your perspective, it could be invaluable." Nathan sat back, his mind whirling. The offer was unexpected, a bridge between his world and Maxwell's that he hadn't considered possible. I don't know what to say," he admitted. "It's a lot to think about." Maxwell nodded, understanding in his eyes. "Of course, I don't expect an answer right away. Just promise me you'll consider it." Before Nathan could respond, his phone buzzed insistently. Glancing at the screen, he saw it was the hospital. "I'm sorry, I have to take this," he said, stepping away from the table. The call was brief but urgent. A multi-car pileup on the highway had resulted in several patients with severe head trauma being rushed to St. Mary's. Nathan was needed in the OR immediately. "I have to go," he said, as he returned to the table, already shrugging on his jacket. "There's been an accident, multiple head trauma cases coming in." Maxwell stood, concern etched on his face. "Of course. Go. Save lives." "That's who you are, Nathan. Never forget that." As Nathan rushed out of the restaurant, Maxwell's words echoed in his mind. That's who you are. But was it all he was? Could he be both Dr. Foster, the neurosurgeon, and Nathan Blackwood, heir to a corporate empire? The next several hours were a blur of focused intensity. Nathan moved from one operating room to another, his hands steady, his mind clear. This was where he felt most alive, most himself. The complexities of his personal life faded away, leaving only the immediate challenge of saving lives. It was well past midnight when Nathan finally emerged from the OR, exhausted but satisfied. All 4 patients had pulled through, their prognoses cautiously optimistic. As he made his way to the doctor's lounge to grab a much-needed coffee, he nearly collided with Elizabeth Chen. "Nathan," she said, surprise and concern mingling in her voice. "I thought you had the night off." He shrugged, the weariness of the long night suddenly catching up with him. Multi-car pileup. They needed all hands on deck. Elizabeth nodded, studying his face with the keen eye of both a doctor and a friend. "You look exhausted. And not just from tonight. Is everything okay?" Nathan sank into one of the lounge's worn armchairs, cradling his coffee cup like a lifeline. It's a lot, Elizabeth. Getting to know Maxwell, learning about my birth mother, meeting family I never knew I had. And now? He trailed off, unsure how to articulate the turmoil of emotions swirling inside him. Elizabeth sat across from him, her posture attentive. And now? She prompted gently. Nathan sighed, running a hand through his hair. Maxwell wants me to take a role in Blackwood Industries. Head up their medical technology division, or their charitable foundation. He talks about legacy, about making a difference on a global scale. Understanding dawned in Elizabeth's eyes. And you're torn. Nathan nodded, grateful for her perceptiveness. Part of me is intrigued. The resources, the potential impact, it's staggering to think about. But then nights like tonight happen, and I'm reminded of why I became a doctor in the first place. Elizabeth was quiet for a moment, her expression thoughtful. Nathan, she said finally, do you remember what you told me when you first started your residency here? Why you chose neurosurgery? Nathan smiled faintly at the memory. I said I wanted to do the impossible. To fix what others thought was beyond repair. Elizabeth nodded, a smile touching her lips. Exactly, and in the years since I've watched you do just that, time and time again. But Nathan, there's more than one way to do the impossible, to fix what's broken. She leaned forward, her gaze intense. Don't get me wrong. You're a brilliant surgeon, and the lives you've saved, the families you've helped, it's incredible. But imagine what you could do with the resources of Blackwood Industries behind you. The research you could fund, the technologies you could develop. You wouldn't be giving up medicine, Nathan. You'd be expanding its reach. Nathan sat back, stunned by the shift in perspective Elizabeth had offered. He had been so focused on the idea of choosing between two worlds that he hadn't considered the possibility of bridging them. I hadn't thought of it that way, he admitted. Elizabeth smiled, reaching out to squeeze his hand. Just something to consider. Whatever you decide, Nathan, know that you have support here. You've earned the respect and admiration of everyone in this hospital. That won't change, no matter what path you choose. As Elizabeth left, called away to her own patients, Nathan found himself staring out the window at the pre-dawn New York sky. The city was waking up, the first hints of sunlight painting the horizon in shades of pink and gold. He thought about the lives he had saved that night, the families who would have their loved ones returned to them. He thought about Maxwell's offer, about the potential to effect change on a global scale. And he thought about Sarah, the mother he never knew, who had dreamed of the man he might become. As the sun rose over New York, Nathan Foster felt something shift inside him. The path ahead was still uncertain, fraught with challenges and difficult decisions. But for the first time since learning the truth about his origins, he felt a sense of possibility, of potential waiting to be realized. He was Dr. Nathan Foster, neurosurgeon extraordinaire. He was the son of John and Mary Foster, who had loved him unconditionally and shaped him into the man he was today. And he was Nathan Blackwood, heir to a legacy he was only beginning to understand. Perhaps he realized he didn't have to choose between these identities. Perhaps the real challenge, the real opportunity, lay in finding a way to unite them, to become a version of himself that honored all aspects of his complex heritage. With that thought firmly in mind, Nathan stood, ready to face another day of saving lives and exploring possibilities. The future was unwritten, full of potential and promise, and he was finally ready to embrace it, in all its complexity and wonder. The Blackwood Industries headquarters loomed before Nathan, its sleek glass exterior reflecting the morning sunlight. He stood on the sidewalk, gazing up at the towering structure, feeling a mix of anticipation and apprehension swirling in his gut. After weeks of soul-searching and countless conversations with both his adoptive parents and Elizabeth, Nathan had decided to take Maxwell up on his offer, at least on a trial basis. Today marked his first official visit to Blackwood Industries as more than just Maxwell Blackwood's long-lost son. As he stepped into the opulent lobby, Nathan couldn't help but feel out of place. His simple suit, while perfectly respectable for a doctor, seemed plain compared to the designer wear of the executives bustling around him. "Dr. Foster?" Nathan turned to see a young woman approaching, her smile professional and welcoming. "I'm Amelia Reeves, Mr. Blackwood's assistant, she said, extending her hand. It's a pleasure to meet you. Mr. Blackwood is expecting you in the main conference room. As they rode the elevator to the top floor, Nathan's mind raced. Reeves. Was Amelia related to his birth mother? Another piece of family history he had yet to uncover? Before he could ask, the elevator doors opened, revealing a bustling office floor. Amelia led him through a maze of cubicles and corner offices, finally stopping before an impressive set of double doors. Here we are, she said, pushing the doors open. Mr. Blackwood, Dr. Foster has arrived. The conference room was a study in corporate luxury, with floor-to-ceiling windows offering a breathtaking view of the New York skyline. At the head of the long table sat Maxwell Blackwood, flanked by several serious-looking executives. Nathan, Maxwell said, standing to greet him with a warm smile. Thank you for coming. Please, have a seat. As Nathan settled into a chair, he couldn't help but notice the curious glances from the other executives. He was acutely aware of how his birthmark stood out, a stark contrast to the polished appearances around him. Gentlemen, Maxwell began, his voice commanding attention, I'd like you to meet Dr. Nathan Foster. As you know, Nathan is my son, but more importantly, he's one of the most brilliant neurosurgeons in the country. He's here today to discuss the possibility of heading up our new medical technology division. A murmur of interest rippled through the room. Nathan straightened in his chair, suddenly feeling the weight of expectation pressing down on him. Dr. Foster, one of the executives spoke up. While your credentials are certainly impressive, I have to ask, what experience do you have in the corporate world? Running a division of this size is quite different from operating on patients. Nathan felt a flicker of irritation at the thinly veiled skepticism in the man's tone, but before he could respond, Maxwell interjected. I think you're missing the point, Richard, he said, his voice calm but with an edge of steel. We're not looking for another corporate yes-man. We're looking for someone with vision, with first-hand experience of what's needed on the medical front lines. He turned to Nathan, encouragement in his eyes. Nathan, why don't you tell us about some of the challenges you've faced in your work? The areas where you think medical technology could make the biggest impact. Taking a deep breath, Nathan began to speak. He talked about the frustrations of outdated equipment, of promising treatments held back by lack of funding. He shared stories of patients he'd saved and those he'd lost, painting a vivid picture of the realities of modern medicine. As he spoke, Nathan felt a shift in the room. The skepticism in the executive's eyes gave way to interest, then excitement. They began to ask questions, to offer suggestions. Before long, the conference room was buzzing with energy, ideas flying back and forth. Hours passed in what felt like minutes. As the meeting finally wound down, Nathan felt a sense of exhilaration he hadn't experienced since his first successful surgery. This, he realized, was another kind of life-saving work, one with the potential to impact millions. As the executives filed out, Maxwell approached Nathan, pride evident in his eyes. That was impressive, son, he said softly. You've given them a lot to think about. And me too, Nathan nodded, still processing the events of the day. It's not what I expected, he admitted. The potential here, the resources, it's staggering. Maxwell smiled, placing a hand on Nathan's shoulder. And it could all be at your disposal. Nathan, I know you have reservations about joining the company, but after today, can you honestly say you're not intrigued by the possibilities? Before Nathan could respond, his phone buzzed insistently. Glancing at the screen, he saw it was the hospital. I'm sorry, I have to take this, he said, stepping away. The call was brief but urgent. One of Nathan's longtime patients, a young girl with a rare neurological condition, had taken a turn for the worse. She needed emergency surgery, and she was asking for Dr. Foster specifically. As Nathan ended the call, he turned to find Maxwell watching him, understanding in his eyes. Go, Maxwell said simply. We can continue this discussion another time. Nathan nodded gratefully, already moving towards the door, but as he reached it, he paused, turning back to his biological father. Maxwell, he said, his voice thick with emotion, thank you for this opportunity, for showing me another way to make a difference. Maxwell's smile was warm, tinged with a hint of sadness. You don't have to choose, you know, he said softly, between this world and that one. There's room for both in your life if you want it. As Nathan rushed out of Blackwood Industries and into the waiting car that would take him to the hospital, his mind was a whirl with possibilities. The excitement of the boardroom mingled with the urgency of his patient's needs, creating a potent cocktail of purpose and potential. He thought about the young girl waiting for him, her life hanging in the balance. He thought about the ideas discussed in the conference room, ideas that could revolutionize treatment for countless patients like her. And for the first time since discovering his Blackwood heritage, Nathan felt not torn between two worlds, but energized by the prospect of uniting them. As the car wove through New York traffic, the Blackwood Industries tower receding in the rearview mirror, Nathan made a decision. He would find a way to balance both aspects of his life, the hands-on, immediate impact of his surgical work and the broader, far-reaching potential of his role at Blackwood Industries. It wouldn't be easy. There would be challenges, sacrifices, moments of doubt. But as he arrived at the hospital, rushing towards the OR where his patient waited, Nathan felt a sense of clarity and purpose. He was Dr. Nathan Foster, neurosurgeon and heir to the Blackwood legacy. And he was finally ready to embrace both parts of his identity, to forge a path uniquely his own. As he scrubbed in for surgery, the familiar routine grounding him, Nathan allowed himself a small smile. The future was uncertain, but for the first time in a long while, he felt truly excited to face it. Whatever came next, he would meet it head-on, with the skill of a surgeon and the vision of an innovator. And in doing so, he would honor both the family that raised him and the one he was only beginning to know. The OR doors swung open, and Dr. Nathan Foster stepped through, ready to save a life and change the world, one patient and one groundbreaking idea at a time. The weeks that followed Nathan's decision to join Blackwood Industries were a whirlwind of activity. Balancing his surgical duties at St. Mary's with his new role as head of the Medical Technology Division proved to be a Herculean task, but one that Nathan approached with characteristic determination and skill. On a crisp autumn morning, Nathan found himself in his new office at Blackwood Industries, poring over reports and proposals. The view from his window was breathtaking, the New York skyline stretching out before him like a concrete and glass canvas. Yet, his mind was far from the cityscape, focused instead on the challenge at hand. A gentle knock at the door broke his concentration. "Come in," he called, looking up to see Amelia, Maxwell's assistant, enter with a stack of files. "Dr. Foster," she said, her tone professional but warm. "Here are the latest reports from R&D. Also, Mr. Blackwood asked me to remind you about the board meeting this afternoon." Nathan nodded, accepting the files with a grateful smile. "Thank you, Amelia. And please call me Nathan." As Amelia turned to leave, Nathan's curiosity got the better of him. "Amelia," he called out, causing her to pause at the door. "I hope you don't mind me asking, but your last name is Reeves. Are you by any chance related to Sarah Reeves?" A flicker of surprise crossed Amelia's face, followed by a soft smile. "Yes, actually. Sarah was my aunt. I knew we were related, Dr. Foster. Mr. Blackwood told me when he hired me." Nathan felt a rush of emotions at this revelation. Here was another connection to his birth mother, one he had interacted with daily without realizing. "I'd love to hear about her sometime, if you're comfortable sharing," he said softly. Amelia nodded, her eyes kind. "I'd like that, Dr. Foster. Perhaps over lunch someday soon?" As she left, Nathan turned back to his work, his mind buzzing with this new connection to his past. But before he could delve too deeply into his thoughts, his phone buzzed with a message from the hospital. Dr. Chen needed him for a consultation on a complex case. With a sigh, Nathan gathered his things and headed out. As he rode the elevator down to the lobby, he couldn't help but feel the weight of his dual responsibilities pressing down on him. He was making progress at Blackwood Industries, yes, but he couldn't shake the feeling that he was being pulled in too many directions. The hospital was a flurry of activity when Nathan arrived. He made his way to Elizabeth's office, where she was waiting with a thick patient file. "Nathan," she greeted him, her face etched with concern. "Thanks for coming so quickly. We've got a challenging case here." As Elizabeth briefed him on the patient, a young woman with a rare and aggressive form of brain cancer, Nathan felt the familiar surge of determination that always accompanied difficult cases. This was why he became a doctor, to tackle the impossible and give hope to those who had none. Hours passed as Nathan and Elizabeth pored over scans, discussed treatment options, and eventually met with the patient and her family. By the time they emerged from the consultation, the sun was setting, casting long shadows across the hospital corridors. "You missed the board meeting," Elizabeth said softly as they walked back to her office. Nathan started, suddenly remembering his other commitment. "Damn," he muttered, pulling out his phone to see several missed calls from Maxwell. "I got so caught up in the case I completely forgot." Elizabeth placed a comforting hand on his arm. "Nathan, you can't be in two places at once. You're trying to juggle too much." Nathan sighed, running a hand through his hair. "I know. I feel like I'm letting everyone down. The hospital, Blackwood Industries, Maxwell. And what about yourself?" Elizabeth asked, her voice gentle but firm. "When was the last time you took a moment to breathe, to process everything that's happened?" Nathan opened his mouth to respond, then closed it again. The truth was he couldn't remember. Since discovering his Blackwood heritage and taking on his new role at the company, he had been in constant motion, never pausing to reflect on the monumental changes in his life. "I thought so," Elizabeth said, reading his silence. "Nathan, you're one of the most brilliant and dedicated doctors I know, but you're also human. You need to give yourself time to adjust, to find balance." Nathan nodded, feeling the truth of her words settle over him. "You're right. I don't know how to do that. How to balance everything." Elizabeth smiled, a hint of mischief in her eyes. "Well, as it happens, I have an idea about that. But first, you need to go home and get some rest. Doctor's orders." As Nathan left the hospital, he felt a mix of exhaustion and gratitude. Exhaustion from the long day and the constant juggling act his life had become, but gratitude for having someone like Elizabeth in his corner, someone who saw him not just as Dr. Foster or Nathan Blackwood, but as Nathan, the person behind both those identities. He decided to walk home, needing the time to clear his head. As he moved through the bustling New York streets, Nathan found his mind drifting to Sarah, his birth mother. What would she think of the path he was on now? Would she be proud of his accomplishments, or worried about the toll they were taking on him? Lost in thought, Nathan almost missed the vibration of his phone. It was a text from Maxwell. "Missed you at the meeting. Everything okay? Let's talk tomorrow. MB." Nathan typed out a quick reply, apologizing for missing the meeting and agreeing to talk the next day. As he hit send, he realized that tomorrow would bring a new set of challenges, a new balancing act between his two worlds. But for tonight, as he finally reached his apartment and sank onto his couch, Nathan allowed himself to simply be. Not Dr. Foster, not Nathan Blackwood, just Nathan, a man still coming to terms with his complex identity and the path that lay ahead. As he drifted off to sleep, Nathan's last thoughts were of the patient he had consulted on that day, of the lives waiting to be saved at the hospital, and of the potential for widespread change at Blackwood Industries. Somewhere in the intersection of these thoughts, he knew, lay the key to finding his balance. He just had to figure out how to unlock it. The next morning dawned bright and clear, a crisp autumn day that held the promise of change. Nathan woke early, feeling more rested than he had in weeks. Elizabeth's words from the previous evening echoed in his mind, reminding him of the need for balance. As he prepared for the day ahead, Nathan's phone buzzed with a text from Elizabeth. "Meet me at Central Park, 7 a.m. Wear comfortable shoes." "Trust me." Intrigued and slightly bemused, Nathan complied. He found Elizabeth waiting for him near the park entrance, dressed in running gear and looking far too chipper for the early hour. "Good morning, Nathan," she greeted him with a smile. "Ready for a little experiment in work-life balance?" Before Nathan could respond, Elizabeth set off at a brisk jog, leaving him no choice but to follow. As they ran through the park, the city slowly coming to life around them, Elizabeth began to speak. "You've been trying to compartmentalize your life," she said between breaths. "Dr. Nathan in one box, Blackwood Air in another. But that's not sustainable. You need to find a way to integrate all aspects of who you are." Nathan nodded, focusing on maintaining his pace as he processed her words. "But how?" he managed to ask. Elizabeth slowed to a stop near a quiet pond, turning to face him. "By remembering why you do what you do. Why did you become a doctor, Nathan?" "To help people," he answered without hesitation. To make a difference. Exactly, Elizabeth said, a note of triumph in her voice. And why did you agree to join Blackwood Industries? Nathan paused, considering. To make a bigger difference. To have the resources to help more people. Elizabeth's smile widened. See? The motivation is the same. It's not about being Dr. Foster or Nathan Blackwood. It's about being Nathan, the man who wants to make the world better. As they continued their run, Elizabeth's words sank in. Nathan began to see his dual roles not as separate entities, but as different expressions of the same core purpose. By the time they completed their circuit of the park, Nathan felt a sense of clarity he hadn't experienced in months. "Thank you, Elizabeth," he said as they cooled down. "I needed this." Elizabeth squeezed his arm affectionately. "Anytime. Now go make a difference, in whatever way feels right today." Energized by the run and Elizabeth's insights, Nathan headed to Blackwood Industries. He found Maxwell waiting in his office, a mixture of concern and curiosity on his face. "Nathan," Maxwell greeted him, "I missed you at yesterday's meeting. Is everything all right?" Nathan took a deep breath, ready to have the conversation he'd been avoiding. "Actually, Dad, I wanted to talk to you about that." Maxwell's eyes widened slightly at the use of the word Dad. It was the first time Nathan had addressed him that way. He gestured for Nathan to continue. "I've been trying to be two different people," Nathan explained. "Dr. Foster at the hospital, Nathan Blackwood here. But that's not working. I need to find a way to be both, or rather, to be myself in both places." Maxwell listened intently, nodding slowly. "What do you have in mind?" Nathan leaned forward, his eyes alight with purpose. "I want to restructure my role here. Instead of trying to run the medical technology division day to day, I want to act more as an advisor and visionary. I can bring my medical expertise and frontline experience to guide our projects, but I don't need to be here full-time to do that." He paused, gauging Maxwell's reaction before continuing. "I also want to establish a partnership between Blackwood Industries and St. Mary's Hospital. We can use the hospital as a testing ground for new technologies, get real-time feedback from doctors and patients. It's a win-win. The hospital gets access to cutting-edge tech, and we get valuable data and insights." Maxwell was quiet for a moment, his expression thoughtful. Then slowly a smile spread across his face. "Nathan, that's brilliant. It's exactly the kind of innovative thinking we need." Relief washed over Nathan. "So you're on board with this?" Maxwell nodded, his eyes shining with pride. "More than on board. I'm impressed, son. You're not just thinking like a doctor or a businessman. You're thinking like a leader." The rest of the day was a flurry of activity as Nathan worked to put his plan into motion. He met with the board to present his ideas, coordinated with the hospital administration to set up the partnership, and began restructuring the medical technology division to align with his new vision. By the time evening rolled around, Nathan felt a sense of accomplishment he hadn't experienced since his early days as a surgeon. He had found a way to bridge his two worlds, to be true to both his calling as a doctor and his newfound role in the Blackwood legacy. As he prepared to leave for the day, Nathan's phone buzzed with a text from Olivia. "Heard about your big ideas from Maxwell. Sarah would be so proud. Dinner this weekend to celebrate?" Nathan smiled, warmth spreading through his chest at the thought of his birth mother's approval. He quickly typed out a reply, accepting the invitation. Just then there was a knock at his office door. It was Amelia, a tentative smile on her face. "Dr. Foster, I was wondering if that offer for lunch was still open. I'd love to tell you about Aunt Sarah." Nathan's smile widened. "Absolutely, Amelia. And please call me Nathan." As they walked out together, Nathan felt a sense of peace settle over him. He had found his balance, not by compartmentalizing his life, but by embracing all aspects of who he was. He was Dr. Nathan Foster, dedicated neurosurgeon. He was Nathan Blackwood, innovative leader at Blackwood Industries. He was the son of John and Mary Foster, who had raised him with love and support. He was the son of Maxwell Blackwood and Sarah Reeves, connecting with a heritage he was only beginning to understand. But most importantly, he was simply Nathan, a man determined to make a difference in the world, using every tool and opportunity at his disposal. As the elevator descended to the lobby, Nathan felt a surge of excitement for what lay ahead. He had faced his past, embraced his present, and was now ready to shape his future. A future that held the promise of healing, innovation, and the fulfillment of a legacy he was only beginning to understand. The doors opened, and Nathan stepped out into the New York evening, ready to face whatever challenges and opportunities tomorrow might bring. The partnership between Blackwood Industries and St. Mary's Hospital was off to a promising start. Nathan's vision of using the hospital as a testing ground for new medical technologies had energized both institutions, creating a buzz of excitement and innovation. On a busy Tuesday morning, Nathan found himself in one of St. Mary's operating rooms, but not in his usual role as surgeon. Instead, he stood to the side, observing as Dr. Elizabeth Chen prepared to use a new neurosurgical tool developed by Blackwood Industries' Medical Technology Division. The patient, a middle-aged woman named Margaret, had a complex brain tumor that traditional methods had deemed inoperable. The new tool, a precision-guided laser scalpel, promised to make the impossible possible. As Elizabeth began the procedure, Nathan watched intently, his mind racing with both medical and entrepreneurial thoughts. He saw the potential for saving countless lives, but also the challenges of bringing such advanced technology to hospitals worldwide. Incredible, Elizabeth murmured as she maneuvered the laser scalpel with practiced ease. The precision is unlike anything I've ever used. Nathan nodded, making mental notes for improvements and refinements. As the surgery progressed, he found himself slipping seamlessly between his roles as doctor and innovator, seeing the procedure from multiple perspectives. Hours passed, and finally Elizabeth stepped back from the operating table, a triumphant smile on her face. "We did it," she announced. "Tumor completely removed, minimal damage to surrounding tissue." A cheer went up from the operating room staff. Nathan felt a surge of pride and accomplishment. This was why he had agreed to join Blackwood Industries, to make moments like this possible. As they left the OR, Elizabeth turned to Nathan, her eyes shining with excitement. "Nathan, this is groundbreaking. Do you realize how many lives this technology could save?" Nathan nodded, his mind already racing ahead. "We need to start thinking about how to make this accessible to smaller hospitals, not just major medical centers." Elizabeth laughed, shaking her head in amazement. "Look at you, thinking like a businessman. But you're right. This can't just be for the elite few." As they walked through the hospital corridors discussing possibilities and plans, Nathan felt a sense of fulfillment he hadn't experienced in years. He was making a difference, not just one patient at a time, but on a scale he had never imagined possible. His phone buzzed with a text from Maxwell, heard about the successful surgery. "Board wants a full presentation next week. Proud of you, son." Nathan smiled, warmth spreading through his chest at his father's words. He was about to reply when another message came through, this one from Olivia. "Lunch tomorrow? Have something important to share about Sarah." Nathan's heart skipped a beat. News about his birth mother always stirred up a complex mix of emotions. He quickly replied, agreeing to meet. As he left the hospital that evening, Nathan's mind was a whirlwind of thoughts and possibilities. The successful surgery, the upcoming board presentation, the mysterious lunch with Olivia. His life had become a tapestry of intertwining threads, each one rich with potential and meaning. He decided to walk home, needing the time to process the day's events. As he moved through the bustling New York streets, Nathan found himself reflecting on how much his life had changed in the past few months. He had gone from being solely Dr. Nathan Foster, dedicated neurosurgeon, to embracing his identity as Nathan Blackwood, son of Maxwell and heir to a corporate empire. But more than that, he had found a way to be both, to merge these seemingly disparate parts of himself into a unified whole. As he reached his apartment building, Nathan paused, looking up at the night sky. Somewhere up there, he liked to think, Sarah was watching. Would she be proud of the man he had become, of the way he was using his talents and opportunities? With a deep breath, Nathan entered his building, ready to face whatever tomorrow might bring. He had a feeling that Olivia's news, whatever it might be, would open yet another chapter in his ongoing journey of self-discovery. As he drifted off to sleep that night, Nathan's dreams were a kaleidoscope of images, operating rooms and boardrooms, the faces of patients he had saved and family members he was just getting to know. Through it all ran a thread of purpose, a sense that he was exactly where he was meant to be, doing exactly what he was meant to do. Tomorrow would bring new challenges, new opportunities, and perhaps new revelations about his past. But for now, Nathan slept peacefully, secure in the knowledge that he was finally living life on his own terms, honoring all aspects of his complex identity. The trendy cafe buzzed with the lunch crowd's chatter as Nathan made his way to a quiet corner table where Olivia waited. Her face lit up as she saw him approach, but Nathan couldn't help noticing a hint of nervousness in her smile. "Nathan," Olivia greeted him warmly, standing to give him a quick hug. "Thank you for meeting me on such short notice." "Of course," Nathan replied, settling into his seat. "Your message sounded important. Is everything okay?" Olivia nodded, taking a deep breath as if steeling herself. "Everything's fine. It's just, I've been doing some sorting through old family belongings and I found something I think you should have." She reached into her bag and pulled out a worn, leather-bound book. "It's Sarah's journal," Olivia explained softly. "She kept it during her pregnancy and for a few years after you were born." Nathan felt his heart skip a beat. He reached out with trembling hands, gently taking the journal from Olivia. "She wrote about me?" he asked, his voice barely above a whisper. Olivia nodded, tears glistening in her eyes. "It's all there, Nathan. Her hopes, her fears, her love for you. I've read parts of it, but I think you should be the one to really dive in." Nathan ran his fingers over the worn cover, feeling a connection to his birth mother that he had never experienced before. "Thank you, Olivia," he said, his voice thick with emotion. "This means more than I can say." They spent the rest of the lunch talking about Sarah, with Olivia sharing memories and anecdotes that painted a vivid picture of the woman who had given Nathan life. By the time they parted, Nathan felt both emotionally drained and strangely invigorated. As he made his way to Blackwood Industries for an afternoon meeting, Nathan couldn't resist opening the journal. His eyes fell on an entry dated just a few days after his birth. "My dearest boy, they tell me I need to let you go, that it's for the best. But how can it be best to give away a piece of my heart? You are perfect, my little one, birthmarks and all. I hope that someday you'll understand that you were loved, fiercely and completely from the very beginning." Nathan felt tears pricking at his eyes. He closed the journal, knowing he would need time and privacy to fully process its contents. The afternoon passed in a blur of meetings and presentations. Nathan found himself constantly aware of the journal in his briefcase, like a gravitational pull on his attention. By the time he wrapped up his last meeting, he was itching to dive back into Sarah's words. As he was packing up to leave, there was a knock at his office door. Maxwell entered, a concerned look on his face. "Nathan," he said, "is everything all right? You seemed distracted in the board meeting earlier." Nathan hesitated for a moment, then decided on honesty. "Olivia gave me Sarah's journal today," he explained. It's a lot to process." Maxwell's face paled slightly. "Sarah's journal," he repeated, his voice strained. I didn't know she kept one." Nathan studied his father's face, noting the mix of emotions playing across it. "Would you like to read it together?" he offered, surprising himself with the suggestion. Maxwell looked taken aback, then nodded slowly. Yes, I think I would, if you're comfortable with that." They settled onto the couch in Nathan's office, the journal between them. As Nathan began to read aloud, he felt a strange sense of connection, not just to Sarah, but to Maxwell as well. They were sharing this experience, this glimpse into the thoughts and feelings of the woman they had both loved and lost. Sarah's words painted a vivid picture of her pregnancy, her excitement and fears, her dreams for her unborn child. She wrote of Maxwell's ambition and drive, of her own desire to create a loving family. And then came the entries after Nathan's birth, full of love, anguish, and ultimately heartbreaking resignation. As Nathan read the final entry, dated just days before the car accident that took Sarah's life, both he and Maxwell were openly weeping. "My darling boy, wherever you are, I hope you know you are loved. Your father and I made a choice, one that haunts me every day. But know this, you were wanted, you were cherished, and you will always be a part of me. I dream of the day we might meet again when I can hold you in my arms and tell you how sorry I am, how much I've missed you. Until then, know that you carry my heart with you always." Silence fell over the office as Nathan closed the journal. He looked up to find Maxwell staring out the window, tears streaming down his face. "I'm so sorry, Nathan," Maxwell said, his voice breaking. "We thought we were doing the right thing, but we were wrong. So terribly wrong." Nathan felt a surge of emotion. Anger, sadness, forgiveness, all swirling together. "I know," he said softly. "I understand now, I think. It doesn't make it right, but I understand." Maxwell turned to him, his eyes filled with a mixture of regret and hope. "Can you ever forgive us?" "Forgive me?" Nathan was quiet for a long moment, considering. Then, slowly, he nodded. I think I'm starting to. It's a process, but yes, I think I can forgive you, both of you." Maxwell reached out, hesitantly at first, then pulled Nathan into a tight embrace. For the first time, Nathan didn't stiffen or pull away. Instead, he found himself returning the hug, feeling a connection to his biological father that he had never experienced before. As they parted, both men wiping away tears, Nathan felt a sense of peace settling over him. The journal had provided a missing piece of his identity puzzle, helping him to understand not just where he came from, but the love and pain that had shaped his earliest days. "What do we do now?" Maxwell asked, his voice still rough with emotion. Nathan looked down at the journal, then back up at his father. "We honor her," he said firmly. "We take the love she had for both of us, and we use it to build something good, something that would make her proud." Maxwell nodded, a small smile breaking through his tears. "I think that's a wonderful idea, son." As they left the office together, discussing plans for a foundation in Sarah's name to help families facing difficult pregnancies, Nathan felt a shift in his relationship with Maxwell. They weren't just a successful surgeon and a powerful CEO trying to forge a connection. They were father and son, united in their love for the woman who had brought them together, even in her absence. The New York night was alive with possibilities as they stepped out onto the street. Nathan looked up at the stars, feeling Sarah's presence more strongly than ever before. He had found his balance, embraced his complex identity, and now, with Sarah's words to guide him, he was ready to write the next chapter of his story, a chapter that would honor all aspects of his heritage and the love that had shaped him from the very beginning. The autumn chill had given way to winter's first frost as Nathan Foster stood at the podium, facing a packed auditorium. The annual Blackwood Industries Charity Gala was in full swing, and all eyes were on the company's newest executive and most intriguing figure. "Ladies and gentlemen," Nathan began, his voice steady despite the butterflies in his stomach, "thank you for being here tonight. As many of you know, the past year has been one of tremendous change and growth, both for Blackwood Industries and for me personally." He paused, his gaze sweeping across the sea of faces. In the front row, he saw Maxwell and Victoria, their expressions a mix of pride and anticipation. Beside them sat John and Mary Foster, the parents who had raised him, their presence a comforting anchor in this new world he was navigating. "Tonight, I'm honored to announce the launch of the Sarah Reeves Foundation," Nathan continued, feeling a swell of emotion as he spoke his birth mother's name. "This foundation will be dedicated to supporting families facing challenging pregnancies and children born with rare genetic conditions." A murmur of interest rippled through the crowd. Nathan took a deep breath, steeling himself for the personal revelation he was about to share. "As some of you may know, I was born with a rare condition that affects my appearance," he said, gesturing to the birthmarks on his face. "My birth parents, in a moment of fear and uncertainty, made the difficult decision to give me up for adoption." The room was silent now, all attention focused on Nathan's words. "I was fortunate enough to be adopted by two incredible people, John and Mary Foster, who are here with us tonight. They raised me with love, supported me through every challenge, and helped me become the person I am today." Nathan smiled at his adoptive parents, seeing the tears glistening in their eyes. "But recently I've had the opportunity to connect with my biological family as well, to understand the circumstances of my birth and the difficult choices that were made. And in doing so, I've come to realize that there are many families out there facing similar challenges, struggling with difficult decisions and uncertain futures." He paused, allowing his words to sink in. "The Sarah Reeves Foundation aims to provide support, resources, and hope to these families. We will fund research into rare genetic conditions, provide financial assistance for medical treatments, and offer counseling and support services. Our goal is to ensure that no family has to face these challenges alone, and that every child, regardless of their genetic makeup, has the opportunity to thrive. As Nathan outlined the Foundation's initiatives, he could feel the energy in the room shifting. What had started as a standard charity announcement was becoming something more, a personal mission, a story of redemption and hope. "This foundation is more than just a charitable endeavor," Nathan said, his voice growing passionate. "It's a tribute to the mother I never knew, whose love for me survived even in her absence. It's a way to honor the parents who raised me, who showed me that family is about love, not genetics. And it's a commitment to use the resources and influence of Blackwood Industries to make a real, tangible difference in people's lives." As he concluded his speech, the auditorium erupted in applause. Nathan felt a wave of relief and exhilaration wash over him. He had done it. He had shared his story, launched the foundation, and taken a major step in merging his personal journey with his professional role. As he stepped down from the podium, Nathan was immediately enveloped in a group hug. Maxwell, Victoria, John, and Mary, all coming together in a moment of shared joy and pride. "That was incredible, son," Maxwell said, his voice thick with emotion. "We're so proud of you, sweetheart," Mary added, cupping Nathan's face in her hands. For a moment, Nathan was overwhelmed by the love surrounding him. Here, in this embrace, were all the pieces of his complex identity, his past, his present, and his future, coming together in perfect harmony. The rest of the evening passed in a blur of congratulations, handshakes, and promises of support for the new foundation. Nathan moved through the crowd with growing confidence, no longer feeling like an outsider in the world of high society and corporate philanthropy. As the gala wound down, Nathan found a quiet moment alone on the venue's balcony. The New York skyline glittered before him, a testament to human ambition and ingenuity. He thought about how far he had come, from a child marked by his differences to a man embracing those very qualities as a source of strength and purpose. He reached into his pocket, pulling out the locket that had been with him since birth. Opening it, he read the familiar words, "You are loved, even from afar." For the first time, he felt the full weight of that love, not just from Sarah, but from all the people who had shaped his journey. As he stood there, gazing out at the city he called home, Nathan felt a sense of peace and purpose settle over him. He had found his place in the world, a unique position that allowed him to bridge different worlds and make a real difference. The Sarah Reeves Foundation was more than just a charity. It was a declaration of who he was and what he stood for. It was a way to honor his past while shaping his future. And as he turned to rejoin the gala, Nathan knew that this was just the beginning of a new chapter in his life, one filled with purpose, love, and the endless possibility of positive change. The months following the launch of the Sarah Reeves Foundation flew by in a whirlwind of activity. Nathan found himself juggling his responsibilities at the hospital, his role at Blackwood Industries, and the rapidly growing foundation with a newfound energy and sense of purpose. On a crisp spring morning, Nathan stood in the lobby of St. Mary's Hospital, surrounded by a small crowd of reporters and hospital staff. The occasion was the unveiling of the hospital's new pediatric neurology wing, funded in large part by the Sarah Reeves Foundation. This new wing, Nathan explained to the assembled group, represents the culmination of our efforts to merge cutting-edge medical technology with compassionate care. Every room is equipped with the latest innovations from Blackwood Industries, ensuring that our young patients receive the best possible treatment. As he led the tour through the new facility, Nathan felt a surge of pride. This was the tangible result of his dual roles. The medical expertise of Dr. Foster, combined with the resources and innovation of Blackwood Industries. The tour ended in a brightly colored playroom, designed to provide a space of joy and normalcy for the young patients. As the reporters snapped photos and jotted down notes, Nathan's attention was drawn to a young girl sitting in a corner, her head wrapped in bandages. Excusing himself from the group, Nathan approached the girl, crouching down to meet her eye level. "Hi there," he said softly. "I'm Dr. Nathan. What's your name?" The girl looked up, her eyes widening as she took in Nathan's distinctive birthmarks. "I'm Sophia," she replied shyly. "Are you a superhero?" Nathan chuckled, caught off guard by the question. "A superhero? What makes you think that?" Sophia pointed to her own bandaged head, then to Nathan's birthmarks. "We both have special marks. In my comic books, that means you're a superhero in disguise." For a moment, Nathan was at a loss for words. Then, smiling gently, he replied, "Well, Sophia, I'm not sure about being a superhero, but I do think our marks make us special. They remind us that we're strong even when things are tough." Sophia nodded solemnly. "That's what my mum says too. She says I'm her little warrior." "Your mum sounds very wise," Nathan said, "and you know what? I think you're the real superhero here." As he stood to rejoin the tour group, Nathan felt a tap on his shoulder. He turned to find Sophia's mother standing there, tears in her eyes. "Dr. Foster," she said, her voice choked with emotion, "I just wanted to thank you, not just for this amazing new wing, but for being here, for being you. You have no idea what it means for Sophia to see someone like her succeeding, making a difference." Nathan felt a lump form in his throat. "Thank you," he managed to say. That means more than you know." As the event wound down and the reporters filed out, Nathan found himself back in his office, lost in thought. The encounter with Sophia had stirred something deep within him, bringing into sharp focus the true impact of the work he was doing. A knock at the door roused him from his reverie. It was Elizabeth, a warm smile on her face. "Quite a day, huh?" she said, settling into the chair across from him. Nathan nodded, still processing the emotions of the day. "It's been incredible," he said, "but also a bit overwhelming." Elizabeth studied him for a moment. "You know, when you first told me about joining Blackwood Industries, I was worried. I thought we might lose you to the corporate world. But seeing you today, the way you've managed to merge both aspects of your life, it's truly remarkable, Nathan." "Thanks, Elizabeth," Nathan said, feeling a rush of gratitude for his mentor and friend. "I couldn't have done it without your support." "Oh, I think you could have," Elizabeth replied with a chuckle. "But I'm glad I got to be part of the journey." She paused, her expression turning more serious. "You've come a long way, Nathan. Not just professionally, but personally. You've embraced your identity, your past, in a way that's inspiring to watch." Nathan felt a warmth spread through his chest at her words. "It hasn't been easy," he admitted. "There are still days when I feel pulled in too many directions, when I wonder if I'm doing the right thing." Elizabeth nodded understandingly. "That's natural. But from where I'm sitting, you're doing something extraordinary. You're not just saving lives in the operating room anymore. You're changing them on a much larger scale." As Elizabeth left, Nathan turned to look out his window at the bustling hospital grounds below. He thought about Sophia and her mother, about the countless other families who would benefit from the new wing. He thought about Sarah, the mother he never knew, and how the foundation in her name was creating a legacy of hope and healing. His phone buzzed with a text from Maxwell. "Saw the news coverage of the new wing. You're doing amazing things, son. Sarah would be proud." Nathan smiled, feeling a sense of peace wash over him. He had found his balance, his purpose. He was Dr. Nathan Foster and Nathan Blackwood, surgeon and philanthropist, adopted son and biological son. All these facets of his identity had come together to create something unique and powerful. As he prepared to head into surgery, Nathan caught his reflection in the window. The birthmarks that had once been a source of shame now seemed like a badge of honor, a visible reminder of the journey that had brought him to this point. He touched the locket around his neck, feeling the weight of Sarah's love and the support of all those who had shaped his life. With a deep breath, he turned away from the window, ready to face whatever challenges lay ahead. Dr. Nathan Foster, heir to the Blackwood legacy and champion for those faced with medical adversity, strode purposefully towards the operating room. He carried with him not just his surgical skills, but the hopes and dreams of countless individuals whose lives he was determined to improve. As he scrubbed in for surgery, Nathan felt a profound sense of gratitude and purpose. He had found his calling, one that encompassed all aspects of his complex identity. And in doing so, he had discovered that the very things that once set him apart were now the source of his greatest strength and his ability to make a real difference in the world. The early morning sun cast long shadows across the Blackwood Industries boardroom as Nathan settled into his seat for the quarterly meeting. Around the table sat the company's top executives, their faces a mix of anticipation and curiosity. At the head of the table, Maxwell Blackwood stood, his presence commanding as ever, but there was a new warmth in his eyes as they met Nathan's. "Ladies and gentlemen," Maxwell began, his voice firm yet tinged with pride, "before we dive into the financials, I'd like to take a moment to acknowledge the incredible strides we've made in our medical technology division under the leadership of my son, Dr. Nathan Foster." A murmur of approval rippled through the room. Nathan felt a flush of pride, tempered by a familiar twinge of imposter syndrome. Even after months of successfully juggling his roles at the hospital and the company, part of him still felt like an outsider in this world of corporate politics and high finance. "Nathan," Maxwell continued, "why don't you give us an overview of the latest developments?" Taking a deep breath, Nathan stood, feeling the weight of all eyes upon him. "Thank you, Dad," he said, the words still feeling new on his tongue. "As you all know, our partnership with St. A. Mary's Hospital has been a game changer, not just for Blackwood Industries, but for the medical field at large." He launched into a detailed presentation outlining the success of their new surgical tools, the promising results from clinical trials of their latest drugs, and the impact of the Sarah Reeves Foundation's work. As he spoke, Nathan felt a sense of confidence growing within him. This was his element now, bridging the gap between the medical world and the corporate realm, translating complex scientific concepts into tangible business opportunities. "But perhaps our most exciting development," Nathan said, building to his conclusion, "is our new AI-assisted diagnostic tool. Early tests show it has a 98% accuracy rate in identifying rare genetic conditions, many of which are often missed or misdiagnosed by traditional methods." The room erupted in excited chatter. Nathan could see the dollar signs in the eyes of some executives, but he pressed on, emphasizing the human impact of their work. "This isn't just about profits," he said firmly. "This technology has the potential to change lives, to give hope to families struggling with undiagnosed conditions. It's about fulfilling the promise we made when we launched the Sarah Reeves Foundation, to ensure that no family faces these challenges alone." As Nathan concluded his presentation, he caught a glimpse of Maxwell's face. His father's eyes shone with a mixture of pride and something deeper, understanding perhaps of the legacy they were building together. The rest of the meeting passed in a blur of financial reports and strategic planning. As the executives filed out, Maxwell approached Nathan, placing a hand on his shoulder. "You continue to impress me, son," he said softly. "You've brought something to this company that we didn't even know we were missing, a sense of purpose beyond just the bottom line." Nathan felt a warmth spread through his chest at his father's words. "Thanks, Dad. I'm just trying to honor both sides of my heritage, the drive and ambition I got from you, and the compassion and care I learned from John and Mary." Maxwell nodded, a flicker of old pain crossing his face at the mention of Nathan's adoptive parents, but it passed quickly, replaced by a look of resolve. "Speaking of which," he said, "I've been thinking. It's time we all sat down together. You, me, Victoria, John and Mary. We're all family now in our own way. It's time we started acting like it." Nathan felt a mix of excitement and apprehension at the suggestion. "Are you sure? I mean, I'd love that, but it might be awkward?" Maxwell finished with a wry smile. "Probably, but it's long overdue. We've all played a part in shaping who you are, Nathan. It's time we acknowledged that and moved forward, together." As they left the boardroom, Nathan's mind was already racing with the possibilities and potential pitfalls of such a family gathering. But underlying the anxiety was a sense of rightness, of pieces falling into place. His phone buzzed with a text from Elizabeth. "Emergency at the hospital. Need you ASAP." Nathan showed the message to Maxwell, who nodded, understanding. "Go. Save lives. That's who you are." As Nathan rushed out of Blackwood Industries and into the waiting car, he felt the familiar surge of adrenaline that came with an emergency call. But now it was mixed with something else, a sense of purpose that encompassed all aspects of his life. He was Dr. Nathan Foster, rushing to save a life. He was Nathan Blackwood, leaving a boardroom where he had outlined plans to save thousands of lives. He was the son of John and Mary Foster, carrying their lessons of compassion and dedication with him. He was the son of Maxwell Blackwood and Sarah Reeves, honoring their legacy through his work. As the car wove through New York traffic, Nathan allowed himself a small smile. The road ahead was sure to be complicated, filled with challenges both personal and professional. But for perhaps the first time in his life, he felt truly, completely himself, all aspects of his identity working in harmony towards a common goal. The hospital came into view, and Nathan steeled himself for whatever emergency awaited. He was ready, not just as a surgeon, but as a whole person, bringing all of his experiences, all of his identities, to bear on the challenge ahead. The car pulled up to the emergency entrance, and Dr. Nathan Foster stepped out, ready to face whatever came next, in the operating room, in the boardroom, and in the complex family dynamics that awaited him. The next chapter of his life was beginning, and he was eager to see where it would lead. The elegant dining room of Maxwell Blackwood's penthouse apartment was filled with an air of nervous anticipation. Nathan stood by the floor-to-ceiling windows, gazing out at the New York skyline, his mind racing with thoughts of the evening ahead. Behind him, he could hear the soft murmur of conversation as Maxwell and Victoria chatted with John and Mary Foster. This dinner, bringing together his biological and adoptive families, was something Nathan had both longed for and dreaded. "Nathan," Mary's gentle voice broke through his reverie. "Are you all right, sweetheart?" He turned to face his adoptive mother, seeing the concern in her eyes. "I'm fine, Mom," he said, managing a small smile. "Just a little overwhelmed, I guess." Mary reached out, squeezing his hand. "I know this isn't easy, but we're all here because we love you. Remember that." Nathan nodded, drawing strength from her unwavering support. He looked around the room, taking in the scene before him. Maxwell and John were engaged in what appeared to be a friendly debate about recent medical advancements, while Victoria was showing Mary photos on her phone, both women laughing at something on the screen. The sight of his two families, so different yet coming together for his sake, filled Nathan with a complex mix of emotions. Gratitude, love, anxiety, hope, all swirling together in a potent cocktail. "Shall we move to the table?" Maxwell's voice cut through the chatter. "Dinner is ready." As they settled around the dining table, Nathan found himself at the head, with Maxwell and John flanking him on either side. The symbolism wasn't lost on him. He was the bridge between these two worlds, these two families. For a moment, an awkward silence fell over the group. Then, surprisingly, it was Victoria who broke the ice. "So, John, Mary," she said, her tone warm and genuine, "Nathan's told us so much about you. I'd love to hear more about what he was like as a child. I bet he was quite the handful with that brilliant mind of his." Mary's face lit up, and she launched into a story about young Nathan's first science fair project, an overly ambitious attempt to create a miniature ecosystem that had ended with a flooded basement and a very impressed biology teacher. As laughter filled the room, Nathan felt the tension begin to dissipate. The conversation flowed more freely after that, with John and Mary sharing stories of Nathan's childhood, while Maxwell and Victoria offered insights into the Blackwood family history. Midway through the meal, Maxwell cleared his throat, drawing everyone's attention. I'd like to say something," he began, his voice uncharacteristically hesitant. "John, Mary, I owe you a debt I can never repay. You took in my son, our son." He glanced at a framed photo of Sarah on a nearby shelf, "and gave him everything Sarah and I couldn't. You loved him, supported him, helped him become the incredible man he is today. Thank you doesn't begin to cover it, but thank you." John nodded solemnly, reaching out to clasp Maxwell's hand. "Nathan has been the greatest gift of our lives," he said. "We're just grateful to have been part of his journey." Mary, tears glistening in her eyes, added, "And we're grateful that he's found you again, that he's had the chance to know his biological family, to understand where he came from." Nathan felt a lump forming in his throat as he watched this exchange. The two sets of parents who had shaped his life, acknowledging each other's role, coming together in their shared love for him. "I think," Victoria said softly, raising her glass, "that we should toast to family, in all its complex, beautiful forms, and to Nathan, who has brought us all together." As glasses clinked and smiles were exchanged, Nathan felt a sense of peace wash over him. This was his family, not divided into biological and adoptive, but united in their love and support. The rest of the evening passed in a warm glow of shared stories, laughter, and deepening connections. As the night wore on, Nathan found moments to connect individually with each member of his extended family. He and John discussed the latest advancements in neurosurgery, their shared passion for medicine bridging any lingering awkwardness. With Mary, he shared quiet moments of gratitude, reaffirming the unbreakable bond between them. Victoria regaled him with tales of the Blackwood family history, filling in gaps in his understanding of his biological heritage. And with Maxwell there was a newfound ease, a sense of mutual understanding and respect that had been hard-won over the past months. As the evening drew to a close, Nathan stood once again by the windows, this time with all 5 of his parents, biological and adoptive, gathered around him. The New York skyline glittered before them, a tapestry of lights and possibilities. "You know," Nathan said, his voice soft with emotion, "for so long I felt torn between 2 worlds, the one I grew up in and the one I came from. But looking at all of you tonight, I realize that I'm not torn anymore. I'm whole. Each of you has given me something unique, something precious. And together, you've made me who I am." He turned to face them, taking in the love and pride shining in their eyes. "I used to think my birthmark set me apart, made me different. But now I see that they're a symbol of how special my journey has been. They're a map of my past, present, and future, all coming together in perfect harmony." Maxwell stepped forward, placing a hand on Nathan's shoulder. "Sarah would be so proud of you," he said, his voice thick with emotion, "of the man you've become, of the way you've brought us all together." John and Mary moved to Nathan's other side, enveloping him in a warm embrace. "We've always been proud of you, sweetheart," Mary murmured, "and we're so happy you found this part of yourself." As they stood there, this unlikely family unit, Nathan felt a sense of completeness he had never experienced before. He was Dr. Nathan Foster, brilliant neurosurgeon. He was Nathan Blackwood, innovative business leader. He was the beloved son of John and Mary Foster, and the biological son of Maxwell Blackwood and Sarah Reeves. But more than any of these individual identities, he was simply Nathan, a man who had faced his past, embraced his present, and was now ready to step confidently into his future. As the night drew to a close and goodbyes were exchanged, plans were already being made for the next family gathering. Nathan watched as his 2 families, once separate, now intertwined, left together, chatting and laughing like old friends. Standing in the quiet of the now empty apartment, Nathan felt a profound sense of peace and purpose. He had found his balance, his place in the world. And with the love and support of his expanded family, he was ready to face whatever challenges and triumphs lay ahead. The journey that had begun with a shocking discovery in a hospital room had led him here, to a place of acceptance, understanding, and unconditional love. As he turned off the lights and prepared to leave, Nathan caught his reflection in the window. The birthmarks that had once been a source of shame now seemed to glow with an inner light, a testament to the beautiful complexity of his life story. With a smile, Nathan stepped out into the New York night, ready to write the next chapter of his extraordinary life.